Good evening, everybody. Welcome back then to another LFM stream where we are here for round number 6 of the Case King Pro Series of Season 12. We are taking it to the absolutely legendary circuit that is Spa Franchorchamps, which is sure to put on a show 90 minutes of motorsport sim racing goodness for this evening, and I am sure that we are going to have action, drama, thrills and spills, and all things that this championship usually has to offer. And I think it's fair to say that last week, if you were with us for Donington Park, that was an example of exactly that. All the way throughout that 60-minute race, despite us being a circuit that isn't inherently the easiest to overtake at, drama, action, tension, strategy, all was kicking off throughout the entire field, all the way from start to finish, and even really kind of reaching a, it's often, maybe not a climax that we tend to aim for in the world of sim racing or motorsport in general. We don't want things to kick off with a crash, but it's safe to say that when it was a drag race to the line and Luke Addison managing to charge his way to a fantastic P2 finish after scything his way through all of the chaos on the final lap, I think it's fair to say that the drama was fairly welcome at the end of that one. I'm sure for the South African driver as well, getting his debut podium in the Case King Pro Series, he was pretty grateful for all the chaos that took place ahead of him. And like I say, Donington Park, not often known to be a circuit where action really kicks off, but Spa Franchorchamps, I think it's fair to say, has had its fair share of drama over the course of our last few seasons. That, of course, the legendary complex Eau Rouge into Radion on the first lap can be a little bit tricky. The Kemmel Straight gives you the opportunities for 4 wide heading in towards Lake Om, and then it all starts to get very tight and twisty down the hill through corners like Pouon, and then climbing your way back up again through the fast left-hander of Blanchemont and into the bus stop chicane. There is plenty of opportunities for overtaking. The slipstream around here is powerful. There's a lot of braking zones, a lot of opportunities where different cars are going to be quick at different points. Of course, we have the BOP, the custom BOP from LFM, made by you as a wonderful community in play for this season, which should look to even out some of those advantages and disadvantages. But as we well know, each of these GT3 cars subtly different in terms of their respective platforms, so they will have areas where they will be strong, areas where they will be weak, and areas where we can start to get our teeth into some good overtaking action and goodness, and my voice most likely will go up a couple of octaves at time, but that's what we live for here at LFM. Also, I want to say a big thank you to all of you who have been showing more and more support here on the Twitch channel. Although we didn't quite do it by the end of the last stream, over the course of the last week, we have got over that wonderful 900 follower threshold, and we are just 92 followers away from that almighty 1,000, which, considering how the relatively short amount of weeks of this channel has been going, is just an incredible amount of support from all of you, and very grateful for all of your kind words and for tuning in once more. But all of that said and done, let's get a little bit into more detail of what action we are likely to be having for tonight. So Spa Franchorchamps, what a circuit it is. 19 turns of history in the world of motorsport. 7 kilometers, one of the longest circuits around the globe, and it gives you every opportunity for some fantastic racing through La Source, and then beginning that almighty climb up through the hill. Eau Rouge, Radion, fast corners, flat out in qualifying and race trim in the dry for these GT3 cars. But I tell you what, it's definitely a ride that you have to buckle in for. Overtaking in towards Lake Om, definitely possible. And then as you work your way down through the hill of Bruxelles, No Name, a little bit trickier to maybe make passes through there, but we will see drivers who maybe force some opportunities through Piff Paff of turns 12 and 13. As you then make your way through the double right-handers at the bottom of the hill and wind your way back up the climb once more. And Spa is one of those circuits where you need such a good, strong combination of cornering performance at low speed, medium speed, high speed, and of course, mostly important, straight line speed as well, because they will all each come into play and each bring you opportunities in the race. So very interesting things ahead of us for this evening. And 90 minutes of racing as well, an extra 30 minutes to our usual hour-long races. And it is going to mean that the elements of tyre wear and tyre strategy just come into play that little bit more and give us some extra opportunities to see how the drivers play that. And also have the strengths and weaknesses of these cars about how they utilise the tyres. You know, we've seen over the last few races, for example, Luke Whitehead taking that fantastic victory at Donington Park. He was under so much pressure throughout that entire race. And the Porsche, very good over one lap, able to hook up its tyres, but did eat away at its tyres over the course of the race, and the McLarens became increasingly strong as time went on, and that was really what gave him quite the headache for the young Brit, who became the first double winner of the season. We'll have to see if he can make it another series of victories in this one, but that Porsche could be a little bit more of a struggle. We'll have to wait and see quite how he gets on amongst all of that. Drivers underway in practice now for just a final few minutes of getting their cars dialed in, and we'll be making our way over to that session in just a moment, where we can start to have a little bit of a gander at how they are getting on for this evening. And I do believe, in fact, that we can do that right away now. And it's going to be a really interesting one tonight because we have some fantastic names. We always have fantastic names in the grid, but we have some pretty special ones that are returning to the field and making the competition, the level of the caliber of these drivers in the top split of the Pro Series is just going from strength to strength. And I'll tell you what, it makes our lives even better. Sometimes makes life a little bit trickier for me in the comms box trying to keep up with all the action they put on for us, but what it does do is gives us plenty of opportunities to see some of the very best that ACC and sim racing has to offer, going toe-to-toe and competing for some fantastic prizes. We have Marco Yonkers returning fairly recently to the Case King Pro Series and immediately picking up where he left off of being at some of the pointier ends of the grid in all of that. And a name that made his way, I do believe, into the chat for the first time last week. His ears must have been burning because Michael Tauscher, also known as Mitchy Tauscher, in the Unicorns of Love Lamborghini is back in the field. And don't let that number 31 plate fool you. This man is mighty behind the wheel of any car that he gets into. Quite often we've seen him use the Mercedes and the Porsche, his two main go-tos of the past, but the Lamborghini proving to be a competitive platform this season as well, so we'll see what he can extract out of that car, but is going to be very much a contender, I imagine, for at least the podium in this race, if not maybe the race win. So keep an eye on this man. Of course, we also have a man that has a lot of support in this championship, Mr. Carpet, back with us in the server once again. I did find him a moment ago, I do believe. If there we go, the team of Carpet in that wonderful, wonderful Bentley. We have a nice close-up of that Grip Hacks engineering car in due course when we get into our starting grid in just a little bit. Of course, looked like he was on target potentially for a race victory over at Bathurst, had a podium at the season opener as well at Kyle Army, and that Bentley has been varying in terms of how much pace he has been able to extract from it from time to time. Obviously, the BOP allowing that car to be a little bit more in contention than we've typically seen in seasons of the past, and actually being a valid choice for these drivers, and it's great to see the big bad Boatley contending up at the front. Spa could be a little bit tricky. The one element of the Bentley that does tend to just remove itself a little bit from competition from time to time is just how tail happy it is. Now, certain circuits, that is a major strength. You look at circuits like Zolder, for example, or Hungary, the Hungaroring, Kyle Army, there are some pretty tricky sections around there where you really need the car to naturally rotate, and as you kind of, as you guide the weight transfer side to side in all of that, the Bentley unusually has its centre of mass slightly further forward than it does back, and what it means is you get this pendulum effect running through the rest of the car, and that can play really nicely into certain circuits. Spa, on the other hand, may be a little bit more tricky to deal with. We've got these longer corners, these high-speed, fast commitment corners, and although a lot of downforce on board, the Bentley has the biggest diffuser, I think, of all time, and a whopping great rear wing to go with that, just naturally, as far as kind of mechanical grip goes and the way that the whole vehicle dynamics plays out, not likely to be the easiest of platforms to wield around this circuit. You're looking more like the McLarens, the BMWs, Aston Martins that look very strong. The Porsches will have their strong points. Middle sector should be pretty good, but may struggle a little bit in the first and final sector. So expect to see some of those cars being pretty quick and handy. Number 6 of Jardier currently making his way in towards the bus stop chicane. And closing out some final laps. Fastest man in the server right now is Lewis Roters for ITB Racing. Has been looking increasingly strong over the last few weeks and definitely is hunting around for his first win in the Pro Series. There is no doubt. Of course, Niels Narks very strong at Donington Park as well. Once again contending for the win potentially, but didn't quite get that one as he continues to adapt from the M4 that he's been so faithful to over the last few seasons and into the Aston Martin, but clearly showing that his wealth of experience that he has in the cockpit is paying dividends and finding a good amount of lap time and pace at the moment. Practice rounding out, and we often talk about how it's going to play out just as these final few minutes tick on by in towards qualifying. How do you utilise these final moments? Do you look to try to get the car dialed in for race trim? Do you look to try to see if you can get qualifying as good as possible? And it's so tricky sometimes to actually determine which one of those things is going to be most important. And Spa is a great example of that. On the one hand, getting yourself further up the grid as far as possible sometimes means that you stay out of that lap 1 carnage just that little bit better. And it means that you're just slightly less likely to be, for want of a better word, horribly murdered on the opening lap of the race. However, it depends. Things could kick off anywhere up and down the grid, and sometimes it really doesn't matter when you end up being placed in the field. Whilst you do have a little bit more likelihood of being able to avoid the carnage if you are towards the pointy end, you've got less cars in front of you for a start, and there's less of that concertina effect on the opening lap. It's still very tricky to predict, and not always a guarantee. Of course, the other element of this, 90 minutes of racing around a circuit where tyre wear is going to be very important. Tyre management is going to be critical for these cars today. And whilst it's not quite the same extent that we would see perhaps for a very long endurance race, potentially for a certain 24-hour coming up in the not-too-distant future, that it is still very, very important, especially with the nature of the corners around this circuit. You need a car that's going to give you continuous confidence throughout that entire stint. Of course, they have that mandatory pit stop around the halfway point, so we'll see how everyone deals with that, and we'll get to that in just a little bit, making our way over to qualifying in just a moment, as I think the server will tick on over once Mr. Korekis, who's looking to try to get himself up to the P1 spot. He didn't quite manage to beat Lewis Roters' time in those closing moments, but showing that once again the Lithuanian and the champion from 2 seasons ago, who still has the equal most dominant season in Case King Pro Series history with Tinko van der Velde after his fantastic efforts last season to see his way towards the crown for the first time. Korekis showing that he's finding a little bit more of that spirit that we were so used to seeing him dial in time after time and week after week when he was back in the Porsche, getting more and more confident in the McLaren and trying to see if he can get himself back to winning ways sooner rather than later. It looks like, though, Mr. Sean Tempest in the number 22 McLaren is going to be the one leading the way in qualifying, and we're already seeing the support for Mr. Carpet, and the bids are already coming on in for pole position going the way of the Finnish driver. Be very interested to see what you guys think in the chat as to how this field is going to play out. Will we have that Bentley? Took pole position at Bathurst, of course, was feeling very dialed in with that car on that occasion, and will be possibly looking to try to make it a second point of the season. And for Luke Whitehead, he does indeed. So, yes, it's been a very strong season so far from the British driver. as looking through his tally, 3 wins to his name. Actual fact, him a little bit of injustice there in the opening. So yeah, 3 wins for Luke Whitehead at the 2nd, 4th and 5th races, and he'd be looking, trying to see if he can make it 3 in a row today. But Spa, it's going to be a tricky one to put performance like that together, and a lot of opportunities to overtake him. That poor straight line speed, better than it used to be, but with the level of slipstream and toe effects that you can get around here, may not quite be enough to offset the straight line speed of cars like these McLarens. Speaking of McLarens, let's go on board with Mr. Tempest, opening up our qualifying session for the first time, as he heads down towards Lassource, trying to see if he can spot his braking point, braking around the 80-meter mark, and then get himself tucked into the apex. There's a little bit of that divot on the inside. Really want to get the car hooked in there, and then squat down on the rear tyres, on the power as quick as you can, and then carry all of that momentum, because this exit out of turn 1 effectively defines your entire opening sector. Of course, a little bit of rolling resistance going through Eau Rouge or Radion. You want to optimize your line through there as you carve your way through those series of turns, and then your aero levels are going to influence as well. But Lassource is where it mostly counts. Now try and spot your braking point heading in towards Lake Combe. Use a little bit of curb on the left-hand side and swing the car over in towards that first apex, clipping the second apex, get yourself over to the left-hand side, opening up the next right-hander, early upshift into towards 3rd gear, control the rear end as you head through there, and then start to make your way down the hill for the first time in towards Bruxelles. Bit of a double apex here, very similar to Luffield in that respect, although of course with the slight difference that we're on this downward slope, so you've got additional off-camber in the tarmac as well, that's losing you grip all the time. Use as much of a track as you dare through No Name, and now big commitment corner heading in towards Pouon. Takes 4th gear there, little bits of uncertainty it felt like as he was getting on the power front end, didn't seem to dive in towards the apex as much as I imagine that Sean would have wanted. Now in towards Piff Paff, really want to get the flow heading through here as you just then open up momentum in towards the second apex. Use a little bit of the AstroTurf on the right hand side, be careful of track limits, you will invalidate the lap if you're not careful. Clip this right hander, opening up the power, then heading in towards this turn 15 and using all of the track as you can, and you see him immediately then shortening up that line to try to get as fast a run in towards Blanchimont as he can. Again, a corner that you can take flat pretty comfortably in these GT3 cars. Do need to be wary of the height of that curb on the left hand side though. It will chuck you around if you are too greedy with that. Now square out the braking zone in towards the bus stop chicane, and clipping that first apex maybe could have been a little bit tighter. Pretty good through that one as well. Doesn't look like this McLaren particularly rotating too naturally in that, and for Sean Temps going to be a 216.6, and I think we'll see some times immediately start to topple those. Marco Bischoff into the 215s immediately on a 0.9. Carreras was going very well in the middle sector, lost a lot of time. Marco Yonkers just outside of what Bischoff's first SSR. Niels Nars goes up to P3 as well as more and more times start tumbling in. Something to take into account for this qualifying session as well is that these drivers actually just have less laps to be working with and dialing in their car. It's a longer lap, same amount of time in qualifying. So, you know, which is also another reason, the length of this circuit, as to why any sort of drive-through penalty as Lewis Roters in the McLaren goes almost 10th of a second clear of Marco Bischoff. Fantastic lap time from him to see what the rest of the grid will continue to do as these times start to tumble. But yeah, this Spa circuit, the length of it does have a lot of additional impacts. If something goes wrong, you have a very long lap until you get back to the pits. Drive-through penalty, even more cataclysmic than it normally would be. 90 minutes is just usually not enough to offset the deficit that you have from something like this, and this is a very, very long pit lane, so a big, big penalty if you do end up getting one of those. The drivers will be trying to stay clear of getting any speeding into the pit lane. It's a tricky pit lane entry as well. The concrete walls either side of you are very, very narrow. And as we're getting the pole prediction, it's a bit of a fun game. I think we should do this in future as well. So we've had a 0.595, 0.674 so far as the predictions. I'll give you a bit of a heads up. Lewis Roters currently going 0.3 of a second faster than his previous effort, so he's very much looking, trying to get himself into those 0.5s sooner rather than later. We've also got Niels Nars going pretty quickly in the Aston Martin as well, trying to get himself in towards the 215s. And I think we're still waiting on a couple of hard hitters in this grid as well to get their attempts in. Luke Whitehead is one of them, going for his lap. as Midgie Tauscher currently sitting P19, 2:16.8. He is half a second up already on his lap time. Gert Fischer's on a pretty handy lap as well. Whereabouts is he? He's a bit further along and is currently looking to see what he can do. Should get in towards these 2:15s, if I'm not mistaken. 0.6 of a second up, will be very much challenging towards the front row. Dario Amilo improved, Grant Carreras improved, well, not enough to topple the McLaren of Lewis Roasters. Niels Narks does an 8.45. Lewis Road still going very quickly. Gert Fischer's going to get him up amongst there as well. Goes P3. Jacob Osterman, though, gets himself into provisional pole spot, but his teammate, Lewis Roasters, is absolutely flying. My goodness, this final sector for Lewis Road's been monstrous, and it's going to be a 2:15.457. Scratch all the bets so far. He's immediately toppled the timing sheets there. Midgie Tauscher gets a more representative lap time in. So does Castorino in the Aston Martin. Of course, previous race winner, capitalising on the carnage that took place at Bathurst. Very nearly did the same at Donington Park. And gets himself into what is a provisional front row spot. Smooth as you like, Zapsy, with the corrected time in there. Castorino, equal lap time with Luke Whitehead, but Luke Whitehead got his time in just a smidge later and 2,000 shy of George Boothby, who gets himself to the front row. And I tell you what, starting on pole position here isn't always necessarily the best place to be if you want to be leading at the end of lap 1, because that run down towards Lacombe, it is long and it is very much likely that those positions could be swapping around. And oh dear, we've already got the cheating scandals going on in the chat. It's chaos, and we haven't even closed out qualifying. But we'll see how the rest of his session plays out. But that is a mighty benchmark from Lewis Roters, who has just seemed to have kind of made himself a bit more of a dark horse over the course of this season. Sort of initially, he was quick, there's no doubt about it, but it just didn't look like he necessarily had enough to be competing for race wins. And these last couple of races, he has very much started to throw that into play and could very much be looking to try to get his first win in the Pro Series this evening. He is just a handful of points behind his teammate, and Luke Whitehead leading the charge at the moment, about 250 points ahead of Jacob Osterman. Also, of course, remember there are 2 drop scores over the course of this season for each of these drivers. So Tinko van der Velde, on the face of it, a little bit removed from the championship fight, but with those drop scores in effect, he is very much still a driver that could be contending for the championship. And he, of course, is trying to see if he can make it 2 on the bounce, something only that Marco Bischoff has done so far in all of our seasons of the Pro Series. Carpenter, big final sector from him. Oh, damn, that's not the way we want to do it. That's the problem with TC0 in this current philosophy. And the tail-happy Bentley by nature loses 2/10 on the exit and stops himself from getting in towards the 2:15s. And yes, of course, Timo Carpenter just purely doing it for the crowd, and will currently see himself sitting just outside of the top 20. As meanwhile, we have a look at Tinko, seeing what he can do in this number 5 BMW. Very distinctive liveried car, as he then climbs through Radion down this long straight. And this is, this just gives you a sense of scale, the amount of time that this tow effect has to come into play. We see slipstream really start to kick in. If you're in a reasonable proximity to the car in front, you can tend to maybe see that after around 400 meters, something like that, you will start to see a noticeable gain from the car behind. That back straight is a very long distance. It really allows that car behind, when it does have the slipstream, to just keep on building momentum. And once it then pulls out of slipstream, the overspeed in towards Lacombe can certainly result in some pretty tasty action. So we'll have to see how all of that plays out. Just over 4 minutes left of this race to go. Qualifying session to go. And yes, absolutely, Castorino, definitely another dark horse. He's been mighty over the course of this season. Currently sitting P4 in the standings, of course, has that 1 race victory to his name. But he has very much been up there competing at the top. He was a race winner last season for his one and only entry at Monza, where he dominated that race in the McLaren when it was a fairly new addition to the world of ACC. And in this Aston Martin, he has been continuing to show that he has some very strong pace at hand as well. Grant Carreras improves on his lap time on the last one around. He's just about to get going for another one, 2:15.850. For Carreras, currently only good enough for P9, has half a second almost to find if he wants to be contending for pole position. And one driver that is finding time at the moment is Jacob Osterman. He's on 0.710 at the moment. The margins are super tight between these drivers. In actual fact, one of the biggest gaps is that between the first and second place spots. Lewis Roters doing a fantastic job in that McLaren at the moment to find lap time. And Osterman, I think he may have invalidated, in fact, on the exit of turn 14. Not ideal for the ITB racing car. We'll have to find another opportunity. And he's only going to have, realistically, 2 more attempts at this if he has got enough fuel on board the car. So we'll head over to this man, Michi Tauscher. He's just started a lap in the Lamborghini. Of course, immediately kind of picking up where I imagined he would leave off in the Lamborghini. Currently sitting P6, the lead Lamborghini of the field as well. But we'll be looking, trying to see if he can move himself up a little bit. He's had a good Sector 1 so far. Good momentum carried through Eau Rouge and Radion as that V10 screams its way down towards Lake Om. And we'll tune in with him in just a moment. Meanwhile, Marco Jonker's improving in the BMW, 7 thousandths of a second behind Grant Carreras and slotting that BMW just inside of the top 10. Tinko's final lap time as well. He's found a couple of tenths. That can see him getting towards the top 5, maybe even a bit more if he can continue to find lap time, of course. A man that has had many pole positions, hasn't been with us for too many seasons, but the seasons he has been with us, he has shown that his one lap pace tends to quite often be second to none. You know, really, the likes of Jacob Osterman, he's been exceptionally quick and consistent in qualifying trim, although he's been a little bit upstaged by his teammate Lewis Roters at the moment. Luke Whitehead, exceptional over a single lap. Grant Carreras, Marco Bischoff as well, has had some absolute blinders. And Tinko very much looking like he could be on target for another good one again. Currently not the lead of the BMWs. He'll want that, if nothing else. And the one thing about Tinko is that you just simply cannot rule him out whatsoever. And I'll tell you what, we can't rule out half the field. We've only got a couple of minutes left to go. George Boothby is improving. Jacob Osterman is improving as well. Michi Tauscher a little bit back and forth on his delta. We've got Marco Bischoff starting a lap. Gert Fischer as well. But Tinko is going to be the first one that could seriously look to move his way up through the field. And 3 tenths up on his lap time is going to be good enough, perhaps even for the front row if he can, and he does by just a few thousandths of a second over George Boothby. Not enough to contend with that mighty time from Lewis Roters, but immediately gains several positions and important positions as well for this championship. Luke Whitehead will start no higher than P5, unable to improve on his lap time, and he has abandoned it into the pits. Jacob Osterman invalidated his lap last time around, but he should make it across the line to maybe have an attempt at one more. George Boothby, though, this, I think, it's going to be mighty close. I think this will be his last lap, although he may potentially just about sneak it at the line. He is finding a tenth of a second, though, and this will be the closest so far Lewis Roters has come under pressure. How good was George Boothby's bus stop chicane last time around? He's a little bit deep at the first apex, going to compromise his exit out of the last, and it may actually lose him all the time that he was gaining. It's still going to be an improvement, I do believe, and he gets himself within a tenth of Lewis Roters, and then crucially, he gets across the line just before the timing beam goes out. Jacob Osterman as well starting up a lap. Carreras has found a couple of dents. He's in the middle portion of the lap as well. Bischoff, Fischer as well, all on their own bids in the opening portions of the lap. See if we can close in on someone that's near the latter stage of their attempt. Got Sean Tempest coming into the final sector now. This time Brennan must have sneaked his way towards the line as well. So several drivers on their laps, and Lewis Roters is trying to find time. He's not entirely comfortable right now with the margin he has. I'm not surprised. George Boothby has certainly sliced its way down, and we'll see what each of these drivers can do. Michi Tauscher may get a little bit of traffic. Santama improves his way up to P16. Great effort there from the number 16 car. Osterman using up every element of the road, and maybe a little bit too much, and that's possibly going to lose him a chunk of lap time. See how Marco Jonkers fares through there, a lot more composed in that BMW, and he's finding good time as well in the closing stages. And we'll see Castorino coming in towards the bus stop chicane. Currently on that 6.32, tied with Luke Whitehead. What can he do? Heading towards the timing beam, and it's not going to move him up a position in the end. He's just a bit shy of his previous attempts. And Steinbrenner, great effort there from the LFM driver, and support coming from the rest of the team there as well. Great stuff from him. Lewis Roters does not improve. He backs out of his lap. Mitchie Tauscher finding a 10th towards the line. It's going to be pretty good, and it's not going to move him up a position in the end. He does improve on his last attempt, but it's only good enough for a mid-6, and that sees him stay in P6. Timo Karppinen not able to break his way inside of the top 20, and Osterman, I think, starting all the way down in P9, unless he can find crucial lap time in the final couple of corners. It's been a pretty strong entry in towards the bus stop chicane. How's he fare on the exit? He's going back and forth between 1 to 2 tenths. It's not going to be good enough for pole, but it should be good enough for P3 for the ITP racing driver, and manages to climb his way up the field, and they are potentially crucial positions as we make our way in towards the race in just a moment. We know just how crucial qualifying can be around here. It's always a tricky one to say, it's always a tricky one to predict, but you really do want to be at the pointy end of this field, because the carnage that can take place, the way it can all kick off in the opening lap, can leave you with quite the busy time of what you'll be contending with if you do end up being around that midfield. Hopefully, fingers crossed, everyone makes it through safely and securely over the course of that opening lap, but we will have to wait and see. But Lewis Roters, a fantastic pole position from the number 21 car. He is going from strength to strength right now for the ITB Racing crew. And seeing what the German driver can do. We'll make our way through the starting order in just a moment. And unfortunately, yes, disappointment in the chat. It won't be a Mr. Carpet pole position for Spa today. And he has quite the charge that he will need to be putting together if he does want to be climbing his way up towards the top spots. That Bentley is going to need to be pretty mighty in race trim. And we'll have to see what he can do. Lewis Roters, though, putting his McLaren on that front spot, and he'll be joined alongside one of the winningest drivers in Case King Pro Series history, George Boothby, in the number 4 McLaren. This is a circuit that he tends to go pretty well at, and he could very well be looking to get that McLaren in towards the top spots at the end of the opening lap. Jacob Osterman, another strong performance from him in qualifying in the number 7 car. He starts P3. Tingo van der Velde in the BMW. Good lap from him in the closing stages to get himself inside the top 5. The top 5 rounded out by, once again, the Italian Amedeo Castorino, just constantly there or thereabouts. Maybe not inherently the quickest, but very much finding lap time in that Aston Martin. Luke Whitehead, your double back-to-back race winner over the last couple of weeks, starts down in P6. Mitchie Tauscher, on his return to the Pro Series, starts in P7 ahead of Marco Bischoff in that very nicely sprout liveried Lamborghini. Gert Fischer starts in P9 with Grant Karekas rounding out the top 10 in the Veloce McLaren. And then Amanda gets a little bit of a shout out from the chat and from me as well. Nils Steinbrenner, great effort there from the German driver to get one of his best qualifying positions, if not his best qualifying position of the Case King Pro Series so far. We had a lot of entries from that man. He's been in a couple of different cars over the last couple of seasons, but the McLaren right now seeming like it's dialed in pretty nicely for him. Dario Melo starts P12, Niels Narks P13, Marco Jonkers starts in P14. He would have wanted a little bit more from that BMW, especially seeing what Tinko was able to extract from it in the end. Valentin Barry, the Frenchman, starts down in P15, the first of the Ferraris with Renault Koets, our Estonian driver on the grid, starting in P16. Santima managed to improve his way up to P17 in the closing stages in number 37. Impressive stuff from him. Michael Frey as well, number 40 in the server. Swiss driver, a good, solid effort from him once again. He gets himself inside the top 20. Noah Reed at the next of those Sprout Esport Lamborghinis. Would have wanted a little bit more than that, I imagine, starting in P19. As Aidan Walsingham, previous race winner for Veloce, in that Lamborghini. He starts in 20th place. The Grip Packs Engineering Bentley livery on that car. A lot of support for this man from the chat this evening, every evening in fact, and we'll see what that Bentley can do. Carl Latour returning to the series as well, I do believe, after potentially a little bit of a while. He starts 22nd place. Angel Stroza, the man from Chile, starts in 23rd in that Porsche, and he is joined alongside good friend and teammate Jardier in the number 6 McLaren again. Would have wanted, I imagine, a little bit more, but a lot of experience inside the cockpit of that car. And Spa is one of those circuits where you really need to remain composed during the course of this race. Leon Benedict starts in 25th position. The pizzas are ready to go, and these drivers are about to be heading off for their formation lap. It's a pretty long one, so we'll be here in just a little short while. As Sean Tempest, Luke Addison, who got that fantastic P2 at Donington Park in the final stages, but unable to quite repeat the same qualifying performance, but who knows, anything could happen in the race. Donington, I think, proved that very much so. Nikolai Polikov, Soldatov and Lobmeyer round out your top 30 positions, with Matti De Campo the next of our TAMs. We've got a full grid this evening as well. Fantastic stuff as in the next spot. Dennis Wietschorker, different livery on that car. Had a very impressive performance, if I recall correctly, at Donington. A little bit further down the grid, though, for this one, so we'll see what he can do. Oystein Brenham starting in 33rd place in the next of the BMWs. Jimmy Holm, a man that often also gets quite a bit of support in the chat as well. The number 34 starts in P34 with Jan Drexler in the number 27, rather bright livery on the BMW there. Definitely won't be missing that one anytime soon. Martin Lawrence starts in P36 for number 36. Vasily Onufriev. I saw the support for the meat snacks Aston Martin as the number 20 car starts in 37th place. Makovsky starts in 38th. And then rounding out the last two spots in the field, we have Tony Mahoney in the Ferrari 296. And then the last of the Boatleys in our field, Samir Foch in the number 24. And we'll be seeing how all of our drivers get on this evening, as they have quite the task up ahead of them, as they will be looking to kick off 90 minutes of action here at Spa in just a short while. I think weather-wise it's looking like it's going to be pretty confidently dry for the duration of this race, so at least that's one factor that they won't have to necessarily quite consider amongst all of this. But tyre wear, pacing yourself over the course of this race as well is going to be very important. Of course, you want to make up positions on the opening lap. It can be crucial, potentially, to how your race plays out. But it's a long race. It's a race where it's a circuit where there are overtaking opportunities at hand. And if you go for those undercut, overcut strategies, you can potentially make those work with the sorts of slipstream and tow effect that you can get around here. But of course, it relies on you having a car that is capable of getting the top end where it matters. And the likes of the Porsches, the BMWs sometimes, I think the BMWs should be fairly decent in terms of straight line speed around here. But the McLarens, I imagine, are likely to be looking very strong. They can run extremely low rear wing values. No, George Boothby on a couple of occasions, giving us a little bit of insight into the world of these alien drivers. No, he's actually been chasing that alien license as of late, and I don't believe he's quite managed to sneak his way up to that license just yet. I will just check in on the LFM page now and see if I can double check. No, he is still a legend of the LFM community, which I think is fair to say. He's a legend of sim racing and also Guitar Hero community as well, but still hunting for that alien license, only right now in the hands of Grant Carreras and Marco Bischoff, I do believe, and Marco Bischoff being the first one to get that, of course, now the number one man on the LFM platform, and we'll see what he is able to deliver. He's down in P8 at the moment, but the first of the Lamborghinis, and certainly a car that could open up some opportunities. Now, if you're getting a little bit excited as these cars close in towards the start-finish line, I'm afraid that you're wrong, because we'll actually kick off heading towards Eau Rouge Radion, which you can probably sort of understand the hairpin, certainly in the world of Formula 1, has had its fair share of action kick off in towards La Source. We had the famous moment when Pastor Maldonado has jumped starting by about 5 seconds over the rest of the grid, was in a very competitive spot by the time he reached turn 1, but of course then was slapped with a rather major penalty. So don't really want to be opening up a pack of 40 GT3 cars in towards a hairpin straight off the bat, so they'll circle their way round this right-hander. Will kick off heading in towards Eau Rouge and Radion, as we'll be about to get underway for 90 minutes of action at Spa Franchorchamps. Buckle in, everybody, because if Donington Park was anything to go by with some of the greatest drivers that LFM and ACC has to offer, I can tell you now this one's going to be a blinder. Sit back and enjoy what we're about to have as Lewis Rotors. Can he close out a victory for the first time in a Pro Series? Got George Boothby alongside him. He's got a fantastic start. Immediately heads in towards Eau Rouge. Jacob Osterman alongside George Boothby, though, is so much like contact immediately as they head over the crest of Radion. Who's going to come out on top? Amadeo Castorino off on the exit. Luke Whitehead trying to see if he can get the toe in that Porsche. Keep him alive in these battles. I think a little bit of carnage further down the order. Nothing too catastrophic, though. And it's Jacob Osterman that maybe even trying to go for the race lead here. Tinko van der Velde taking George Boothby as well. Disastrous start for the British driver. Lewis Rotors holds on to P1. Jacob Osterman makes it ITB Racing 1-2. George Boothby finding back. Better contact with Tinko there, almost going around as they're now side by side heading down the hill for the first time. ITV Racing breaking away in towards Bruxelles. They go. Luke Whitehead trying to go around the outside of Amadeo Castorino and Tinko van der Velde. It was hard racing. It was door to door. Will the stewards have something to say? We'll have to wait and see. But the reigning champion gets himself up into P3. Castorino being sent wide on the exit of No Name, and Mitchy Tauscher immediately capitalising in the Lamborghini, trying to see what he can do, heading in towards Bill on scraps between Narks and Iamolo, and Castorino loses another position. Down towards P7 he goes after losing 2 positions so far on the opening lap. Was kicking off now between Steinbrenner and Niels Narks. Narks losing out on the opening lap, and he's fighting back against a McLaren. The LFM car, great qualifying from him, but down 2 positions. Not the opening bid that he would have wanted in towards Lacombe. And now they begin the climb up the hill, and it all starts to kick off. For Ken, it's kicking off down in the midfield as well. Look at this. We've got Lodmar, Polikov side by side, the 2 Porsches, Matta De Campo and Leon Benedict, where it looks like Benedict is going to come out on top of that one as it's almost 3 wide. Carpenter sending it over the grass, trying to get himself past both Walsingham and Noah Reeder. They're going to go side by side in towards Blanchemont. Take it easy, lads. It's the first lap. We've got 90 minutes of this action, but the Bentley's strong in a straight line, and Carpenter makes his way in towards 20th place, gaining 1 spot as they're all side by side in towards the bus stop chicane, kicking off once more. You see it's all going on in the opening few positions as that was Iamolo rejoining wide off the exit bus stop chicane in towards La Source, and we'll have to go through his drag races one by one now, trying to see if he can get down the inside in towards turn 1. Can't do it. Maybe he can do something. Go Fisher, those left the door open, and those even maybe would save a pair of them as they head up the hill. But the Grunt and the Aston Martin surely not good enough to open up these opportunities, and I think the only way forward on this next batch is going to be going through here. Look at the camera shot. Fantastic speed heading through Radion now, and George Boothby. The McLaren is fast. It's mighty, and George Boothby, he is not messing around. He wants to go for another race victory around Spa, and he is going to do it by powering his way along the outside. Tinko van der Velde, I'm not sure. Does he have the straight line speed to compete? McLaren side by side. There was contact between them before, and there's bigger contact now. And Luke Whitehead maybe able to side his way through to gain a couple of spots, but no, it's still contact between them into that corner. Potentially Mitchy Tauscher sent towards the outside. 2 abreast in towards Bruxelles they go, and George Boothby sweeps around the outside. Can he get the move done? He does. Fantastic move. A little bit of contact again. These 2 can't stay away from each other, and that was Mitchy Tauscher setting one on the inside. Then 3 wide, and Castorino's going for the cutback in all of this as well, and he might get 1, maybe even 2. Karekas onto the grass in the background as down in towards Bouillon they go, and now Karekas trying to get past his teammate. He has got past his teammate. Marco Bischoff is in the fight as well. Luke Whitehead over and under, and the Porsche, the man who's taken 2 victories on the trot, trying to see what he can do, heading in towards Piffpath now around the outside. Boothby extending the gap over Tinko van der Velde. The 2 Volante cars heading into this sequence. Bischoff waiting, watching for an opportunity to get a faithful of the rear wing of that 720S. But Luke Whitehead gets the move done, and now begins the climb up the hill once more, heading in towards Blanchemont. Potentially an opportunity for the Lamborghini. It all depends on the straight line speed capabilities of each of these cars. We'll head up towards the fight, potentially for the lead, actually. Jacob Osterman just a little bit too far away for his teammate, but it's a 3-second gap for the ITB racing cars. Fantastic opening couple of laps from them. Tauscher looking back and forth around Tinko van der Velde, unable to do anything. Bischoff, mighty under braking there around the outside. It'd be a tremendous move from the two-time Pro Series champion if he can pull it off. Correca's sent towards the outside now, and I am a one that we'll go on board with, because look at the camera view that we get of this. McLaren versus Lamborghini, down in towards La Source they go. Santama, Steinbrenner, Nitter, Confident, all battling as well. We can only look into so many places at once. Iamolo trying to see what he can do on the exit. Correca's managing to escape. The two Lamborghinis now side by side, and there's also amongst all of that, you can see the McLaren, the Aston Martin, and Narks lurking, trying to see if he can find an opportunity in that Aston Martin. Iamolo takes a bit of curve, almost into the wall as they head through Eau Rouge and Radion, and now Narks trying to apply the pressure onto Bischoff. Bischoff running out of legs in the Lamborghini. Gut Fisher's going to be joining the party in a minute if these two aren't careful, heading in towards Lake On. And now into the right hand of the braking zone at the end of the Kemmel Straight, and the Aston Martin does get the position done. Iamolo holds on P9, Narks P10, Renault Coots and Valentin Barrier side by side. Ferrari versus McLaren, contact again through this sequence. Michael Frey might get a good run through here if he can capitalize. He's trying to get towards the inside line. Aggressive defense from the Ferrari, holds off the Porsche for the time being. We'll check in on the other scraps as that is no reader trying to reclaim the position over Team Carpenter in the Bentley, getting a little bit of contact, rubbing door to door with the Lamborghini, the Veloce car behind, and it's a big train behind this entire group, and it's all kicking off at every point in the field. What about Polikov pushing the Schorka down? Excuse me, that is Leon Benedict down in towards Pool, and they go, as we saw Luke Whitehead and Grant Correca going toe-to-toe on the last lap. And I tell you what, in terms of our race lead, whilst these two may have escaped from the likes of George Boothby and Tinko van der Velde, Jacob Osterman looking mighty quick at this point in time, and could be even sizing up a move as they head down in towards the bus stop chicane. He is gaining a lot of time in this McLaren. Of course, equal cars in more ways than one, and now number 21 car versus number 7, but Osterman is going to hold fire. He's going to wait for another opportunity, and Lewis Roters withstanding the pressure for now as Jacob Osterman's into the pits. Has he got a drive-through penalty? There's no way. There's no way that Jacob Osterman has a drive-through penalty this early in the race. Disaster. Unless something else happened, I'll try to check in with the stewards and see what's happened in all of that, and if there's any inquiries. But I haven't seen Jacob Osterman. No, so I think that must be for a drive-through, and that is an absolute disaster. And that it was a drive-through for positioning at the start of the race. That is a very, very unfortunate penalty for Jacob Osterman, and that completely is going to ruin any attempt that he has to win his first race of the season. So, big disappointment for him. And of course, the stewards, race control, they would have been reviewing all of that, and in one form or another, they've deemed to not clear that penalty. So major disappointment for Osterman. We may be heading for a 3-wide moment now, heading at the end of the Kemmel Straight. It's Carl Natter in the Lamborghini, Jardier in the McLaren, trying to go all the way around the outside of Sean Tempest. See what he can do. Fantastic side-by-side action in Astroza, being shuffled out of this group a little bit as well. Jardier now sent towards the outside of the next right-hander, and I see in towards Bruxelles. It might be Sean Tempest, it could be Jardier, and Jardier does get the move done under brakes. Leon Benedict around the outside, but he's been shuffled out now by Angel and Astroza. And he may even have a little bit of an issue as Michael Frey going very slowly. Out of no name, who was that? That was Polyakov almost into the wall. And now rejoins on the circuit. He's got Tecampo heading up the inside in towards Bouillon now. And see if he can make the move stick. He can't. So Polikov holds on to 26th position. My goodness, I said it was going to be absolute carnage heading up and down this grid. And I think that is exactly what we're going to be having for the next 80 minutes. We've had 9 minutes of action. Just sit back. This is what we're going to have, I think, for the entire course of this race. Donington Park, not an easy circuit to overtake at, and that was kicking off from start to finish. We had drama all the way to the end, and I don't imagine this is going to play out any differently. Meanwhile, Grant Correca's coming under a little bit of pressure now from Iamolo, the Italian in the Lamborghini, trying to see if the V10 Mauer can out-drag the McLaren that he sees ahead of him. Will he send one up the inside in towards the chicane, and he goes all the way around the outside. Big dive on the brakes there, but I think he's gone too deep, and Karekas composed by the young Lithuanian, and he ends up holding on to that position for the time being. Luke Whitehead, fantastic exit at the bus stop chicane. Can he send one up the inside? Mitchy Tauscher, he does! Aggressive stuff from the back-to-back race winner and current championship leader. But Mitchy Tauscher, he's a wise soul in that Lamborghini. And watch this, Luke Whitehead will try to go on board with him, pulling out that slipstream just a little bit early so that he doesn't get too close through Eau Rouge and Radion. But this Porsche, it does struggle in a straight line, so you need to time this run to perfection. And I think he may have done just that. In actual fact, could he still be a little bit too close? He gets a little bit of a tow from the Aston Martin of Castorino ahead. You can see that Lamborghini fighting back as they head towards this next complex. And I think Tauscher is going to have the inside line. He is going to be able to defend. He gets a little bit caught up over the next series of apexes, but he does just about manage to hold on to that position. Luke Whitehead will have to wait for another opportunity, but he can't wait around too long because Grant Karekas hunting around behind his teammate, and we'll be looking to see if he can find a way through in just a moment. So we look further down the order. Oystein Brenham versus Murkowski. That's a tricky place to go side by side. Samir Foch has had a good start to his race, gaining 8 positions on the opening couple of laps, although he may be about to drop one because of Nufrev in that fan favourite meat snacks Aston Martin, trying to see if he can shuffle the Bentley out of the way. Aston versus Bentley. It's going to be tricky as they head in towards No-Name now. The Bentley has that inside line, but it's wide on the exit. The momentum in favour of the Aston Martin will go on board Jan Drexler, who has a fantastic view of this fight taking place. Indoors Pool on a little bit of contact between the pair of them, and it looks like Anuferev is going to get the momentum on the exit and makes his way through up into 32nd place. And Samed, despite gaining those positions on the opening couple of laps, may even be in jeopardy of losing a couple more. We'll have to try to see how he brings it all together. Also, just a quick note, Jacob Osterman currently 30 seconds down on the rest of the field after that drive-through penalty. But the pace he is showing, there is still a very good chance he can make his way towards the top 20 if he just gets his head down and converts that pace over the course of this race. And of course, every point can count. He'll be hoping this goes down in one of his drop scores, because if you're relying on this as a race result in Osterman's position, then I would imagine that he's had some other tricky ones. Speaking of tricky, Michael Frey again losing time. Someone else gone wide. There's Leon Benedict going wide out the bus stop. Polikov is well trying to see if he can get, it's Lobmeyer that's now side by side with the McLaren heading in towards La Source. Polikov trying to apply the pressure to Leon Benedict ahead. Meanwhile, Lobmeyer and Soldatov going toe-to-toe, and I think it's going to be 2 drag races. McLaren versus Porsche on each of these, and Polikov making his way through. Fantastic exit out of turn 1. Gets himself ahead of the McLaren, but Leon Benedict will be hot on his case. Wide moment for the McLaren of Soldatov there. But I have to check in with each of these one by one. Whitehead can't do it. Steinbrenner manages to make his way past Avasantama in towards P16. And now the next of the group, Leon Benedict, can't do anything about the Porsche that sits in front of him. And same story for Soldatov. Luke Addison trying to make up positions in that 296. He's lost 9 since the start of the race. His man that finished P2 last time out at Donington Park. As they head in towards Bruxelles, number 23 car will be wanting to see if he can find any more positions in this race. But that 296 is likely to be a tricky one to make progress through the field with, because inherently it's not a car that has a great deal of strength in a straight line. It doesn't have a great deal of strength under acceleration. And whilst it is good in the corners, it is good in the brakes. So in that middle sector, may be able to put it through the sequence and then set up a move that could upset another car. It's going to be tricky in order to put that one together, because getting alongside, you need a bit of grunt, either under the bonnet or in the boot, depending on where the engine is placed. And that 296 just not quite able to make his way through there. Meanwhile, Karekas applying the pressure to Luke Whitehead now in towards the bus stop chicane in the Porsche. the back-to-back race winner earlier this season. I need to check in with Walsingham versus Carlton as Walsingham setting on the inside. Nutter trying to respond on the exit, but Walsingham I think is going to get the better exit in the other Lamborghini V10 Power, squirreling its way out of the chicane and manages to get himself up into P19. It's a little bit deep under brakes actually. There was Noah Reeder who's getting a bit caught up behind Timu Carpenter, and up to P17 for Mr. Carpet. And we'll see what he can do in that Bentley. It looks like he may have a decent amount of race pace in that car, so may have some opportunities just yet. Speaking of opportunities, there might be one on the horizon right now for Korekas. No, heard the lift from the McLaren's driver. He doesn't want to make a move on his teammate at this stage of the race. Iamolo unable to close up to the Aston Martin of Niels Narks. Bischoff in hot pursuit behind as well. And Nitter unable to recuperate the lap time over Walsingham to get in a position in towards that sequence. It was pretty close as well between Valentin Barrett and Renault Coops, but the McLaren just a little bit too strong in a straight line. I think it was a good moment in time actually to have a little bit of a check-in. Who has benefited the most in this opening series of laps? We'll head up towards the top end of the grid. You can see Mattia De Campo further down the order, 6 positions gained for the Italian driver, as Lewis Roters now with that 3.7 second lead over George Boothby, and no signs of slowing down anytime soon, and could be in for a pretty comfortable afternoon in the sunny skies of Spa. But of course, long way to go. Has to be careful of those corner cuts, and this circuit will bite you if you don't respect it to the very end of the race. Further down the order, got 7 positions gained for Samir in the Bentley, 8 for Makovsky, who is our biggest winner in the opening series of laps, get himself up into P30. He'll be hoping if he can try to continue that momentum through the field and gain a little bit more. Checking back in though on the fights just inside of the top 10, Narks, Iamolo and Marco Bischoff going toe-to-toe. Each one of these drivers race winners in the Pro Series. I think Narks has a race win to his name. I do believe. I think he might have the one. He certainly had a lot of very competitive races, but I don't think he's had too many wins to his tally. But certainly has victories in a number of other series, there's no doubt about it, and a whole wealth of experience and years in the world of sim racing. But he has 2 very quick Lamborghinis sitting behind him. And speaking of quick Lamborghinis, Mitch Tauscher closing in on another of our resident Italians. Amadeo Castorino maybe starting to struggle just a little bit, as Mitchie Tauscher was actually almost the fastest car on circuit last time round, so could be looking to set up a move sooner rather than later, although Marco Bischoff may be about to beat him to it, because Lamborghini versus Lamborghini. Iamolo goes a little bit defensive, puts pay to the momentum swing of the number 1 car. It's a formidable sight to see in your mirrors, and a little bit of a stat check then. So Narks has not won a race. He's definitely had multiple podiums, I do believe, but hasn't actually managed to take a race win. It's kicking off further down the order, and there's a yellow flag for Angel Stroza, who's gone off at Lacombe, and the number 28 car starting to tumble his way down the order, just about able to hold on to positions ahead of Onufriyev, I do believe, because Oystein Brenham is going to capitalise on the slow momentum of the Porsche and scythe his way through. And we'll try to see if we can catch a replay of what happened there to the Chilean driver to get to the end of the Kemmel stretch. He was scrapping away with Michael Frey. Oh my goodness! That was not the most fantastic of camera angles to see that from. Michael Frey carried on. My goodness, that was a very, very severe amount of contact for Inestrosa. Didn't obviously manage to get going again, but a lot of damage there, and just not able to get the car stopped. I wonder if it was contact in the braking zone or if it was some sort of failure on his wheel, because the speed he hit the wall at was absolutely massive. So a very odd one there, and unfortunately not doing his car any good whatsoever, as the Veloce cars further up the order continuing to scrap away, and no Audis on the field this season, as of course Tinko took his championship in that very car, but very quickly made his way over to the BMW just 1 season later. And it's a car that on its day can be mighty quick, but it is, as Roberto says, it is just a tricky car to extract pace out of. And when you've got this custom BOP in place, the performance offset that can sometimes be seen from that car starts to diminish somewhat, and overall you end up wanting just something that is quick and competitive, but with a bit more drivability so you can get some more consistency out of that platform. Mitchy Tausch has had a fantastic run through Eau Rouge and Radion, and I'm not sure there's anything that Castorino is going to be able to do against the pace of that Lamborghini. In actual fact, I think there may have even been a small lift from the Lamborghini, from the Aston Martin on that occasion. Meanwhile, Marco Yonkers gets himself past Gert Fischer in towards P11, so a couple of cars swapping positions up towards the end of the Kemmel Straight as they head onto what is just lap number 8 of this race. We are barely 20 minutes into this one. Soldatov and Lombard side to side, and that is very deep under brakes there for Soldatov, and number 13 car going to be compromised on the exit. Lotmar back up the inside in towards the next turn, and Leon Benedict now on the case trying to see if he can make his way through down in towards turn 9 there, and a bit deep under brakes from the number 14 and the number 13 as well, but enough to protect the position. They've got Makoski in a hot pursuit as well. And bear in mind, he has gained a lot of positions. Wide moment now for Lodmar, and that might open the door for Soldatov to make his way through in towards Pool 1. And you think he's going to sud his way through there. Little bit of a block pass, and I think the McLaren of Leon Benedict now on the case. Makovsky watching it all unfold. He's side by side with the McLaren on the left-hand side there. We may see him sweep around the outside, stuck a little bit behind Lodmar, but I think Makovsky, he has got the move done. Fantastic opportunistic driving from the number 33. 10 positions gained from Makovsky. And Jimmy Holm being asked for in the chat, unfortunately down in P38 in number 34. He's got a good view though of some potential scrapping he could get involved in very shortly. Veitschorker versus Tony Mahoney, and Veitschorker, the McLaren driver, able to come out on top of that fight this time around. Meanwhile, Luke Whitehead surrenders the position to Grantas Correcas, and I'm not sure that he'll be reclaiming that one anytime soon, because the pace of that McLaren is very good in a straight line. You can see came from quite a way back. We'll see. Does Luke Whitehead allow him to go past? Will it be Veloce team orders? As towards the bus stop they go. And yep, there's the lift. And so Luke Whitehead allowing his teammate to go through. Correcas has that bit of extra pace. And Luke Whitehead thinking about the championship. Feels like he may be able to just hold off a bit of a any other damage potentially done to his championship lead if he just follows his teammate at the moment. Meanwhile, Timo Karppinen in quite an intense scrap. He's got Noah Reeder, Walsingham and the tire all going side by side in towards Lacon. Number 12 car trying to see if he can get the Bentley up another position. Noah Reeder strong on the brakes though, and unable to open up an opportunity for the Finnish driver. As now, got to be careful how you play this one. Is obviously you want to be looking for opportunities to make a move, but you need to be mindful about that battling that's going on in your rear view mirrors as well, because other drivers will try to sense for any window that might open up, and if you just end up a little bit offline, if you compromise your momentum out of one corner, that can be it. And as soon as that door is then opened, it can be a whole series. We saw with Samir Foch, Polikov as well, where opportunities made up and immediately losing out over the course of the next series of corners just from a minor mistake. So really crucial for those drivers to keep in mind. Interesting at the pointier end of the field, Lewis Roters 2:16.9 on the last lap. George Boothby just a few hundredths faster. Tinko van der Velde a couple of tenths faster. So was Mitch Tauscher in that Lamborghini, now having dispatched of Castorino. And these four, the only drivers to stay in the 2:16s on the last lap. Jacob Austin was pretty close, but a low 17 for him. He has taken out 10 seconds, though, of the gap to the next car ahead of him, that is Jimmy Holmes. So Osterman's race certainly not over and done with, and we'll be looking to try to see if he can climb his way up the order just a little bit. But that fight for the lead, definitely maybe not quite done just yet. You factor in a little bit of tyre strategy later on, maybe a bit of an undercut from certain cars, and if there is any scrapping between one another, that all of a sudden that pack can very much bunch up in the next elements of this race. Valentin Barry, an opportunistic move from the Frenchman, sends one up the inside of Renault Coute. I'm not sure though if it's going to be enough to hold off the pace of that McLaren as they get towards the end of the Kemmel Straight through Eau Rouge. Around on they go, the Ferrari planted as you like through here, but the McLaren isn't too shabby either, and the number 29 car will start to close, and immediately once they start to get in towards that top gear, the McLaren building up the speed continuously, sent towards the outside line, hasn't reeled in as much ground as I thought he would have. And I think Valentine is going to keep the move for now. Meanwhile, No Reader having to go defensive again from Teemu. We'll go on board with the Bentley, actually, because it makes for quite a fun onboard. Not just because of fantastic noise, but look at the car control from the number 12 car, TC0. And this car is just, by nature, a complete handful. Must have the brake bars pretty far back as well. You see the back of the car twitching under braking there in towards the right-hander. Early upshift, trying to control the wheel spin. And do the same there. Through in towards No Name. And I must admit, I do have to agree, definitely the best car. I was quite a fan of it myself. It's a handful. It's definitely a handful, but it's a really fun one. As you see, even through full-on, it's a high-speed corner. Do you remember what I said about earlier? I need confidence in the car, consistency in delivery, high-speed, medium-speed grip. Now, the Bentley doesn't quite do that. It will make its way through the corner one way or another, just maybe not pointing in quite the same direction as everybody else. But say, fantastic car nonetheless, and he is continuing to hunt around the back of No Reader, who himself is struggling, of course, in this current meta that we have in ACC, this TC0 style of driving. So TC, for those of you perhaps a little bit new to the world of GT3 racing and ACC, that is traction control, and kicks in to eliminate or certainly diminish the level of wheel spin you have to your rear tyres. And right now, the way that these cars are driving with the latest physics that we have made available to us, benefiting from allowing the car to have the back end just kick out a little bit. We saw a fantastic drift from Teemu a few laps ago, not so much this time on the exit of the bus stop chicane. But he's had a pretty good run though. In towards last source, there could be the potential for a move here, but he's got to be careful of Ada Warsinger, who's hunting around in that Lamborghini. A little bit of a wiggle out of turn one, but allowing those revs with that mighty V8 to build up. Not quite upshifting at the very top end of the rev range there, trying to see if he can keep it in the power band. Oh dear, that's not what you want through Eau Rouge. In actual fact, the hunter might become the hunted, because that was a big drift through the middle of the corner, and it's definitely not it, Tim, because Walsingham now heading down the inside in towards Lake On. Can the Bentley get it under brakes? Big dive down the inside from the Lamborghini, and Walsingham not hanging around. He sensed the opportunity, and I said, as soon as you make a mistake around this circuit, it can all start to fall apart from there. Will it even be another position loss happening? Go defensive, trying to shut the door, but can't deter, sending one up the inside and almost contacts, and Carpenter having to just keep a little bit of space between himself and the inside of the circuit, because there's a Lamborghini in the way, and Jardier is now joining the party as well. Fantastic scrap between these 3-4 cars outside, just inside of the top 20. And Jardier gained 3 positions so far in this race in the opening half an hour. And we'll see when we get towards the pit stop phase, how will drivers start to play? Will they favour the undercut? Will they favour the overcuts? It is very much, sometimes it's an element of what the driver prefers, but so often it's about what is going to work in terms of your race. Are you a car that has extra pace and you're currently being held up? If so, undercut strategy is the way for you to go. If you're a car that's got good pace right now, but you just can't quite utilise it in the way that you want, then that clean air is going to allow you to really kind of reel in another car later in the race, then the overcut strategy may be the thing that gives you that bit of an offset, enough of a tyre advantage that then you can maybe stick with that car ahead of you just that little bit better. As Jardier now closing in towards bus stop chicane, sends one towards the outside and turf, feeling the pressure. De Campo as well from Michael Frey behind. We can only look in so many places at once. Jardier unable to make the move. What about De Campo versus Frey? Big drift from the Swiss, and a little bit of a clomp on the exit of the bus stop there, and I think Polikov may be able to make his way through in all of this as well. He's put his Porsche amongst that battle and will go on board the rear diffuser of the number 40 car, and almost launching an attack up the inside of Matt De Campo. I'm not sure I would have helped him too much. And yeah, the Porsche could start to struggle a little bit. It's interesting, depending on how they have these cars set up, because you will want a lot of rear stability on board the Porsche around this circuit, so it might not eat into its tyres quite as much as you would ordinarily expect, but it could start to become a little bit of a handful. De Campo falling back from those other cars. We'll have to chime in one by one. The Steer able to defend from Jardier. What about Polikov? Can he make a move over De Campo heading in towards Lecom? No, just a little bit too far away, and we'll have to settle and wait for another occasion. Luke Whitehead has stuck with his teammate. Grant Correca's not running away from him. And in fact, we may see an overcut strategy from Luke Whitehead, being towed along by his teammate now, getting a little bit of free lap time in that Porsche. Of course, the straights being really the only element where that car is going to start to struggle and may actually find himself in a position where he can then go for the overcut like he did earlier in this season and allow that strategy to work. Also, Tinkervo van der Velde finding a bit of pace at this midpoint in the race. 2:17.0 from him, and 2:69 from him from Tauscher and Rotors as well. But George Boothby, 2:17.3 on that last one. Could have made just a mistake, but maybe a little bit of weakness there from the number 4 car, and could have that BMW starting to lurk a bit more menacingly in his mirrors than he would have liked, as Jardier gets a massive tank slapper heading up the hill. And you would have to think at this stage, based on images like that these drivers could be starting to struggle a little bit for rear tyre wear at this stage, as this line of 5 cars with Correca's, Whitehead, Narks, Iemolo and Bischoff making their way towards the end of the top 10, and barely anything between one another. Of course, Whitehead being saved a little bit right now by Correca's. He's got good pace throughout the rest of the lap, but he just is able to keep himself protected from Niels in that Aston Martin, who isn't the fastest car in a straight line, but certainly has enough to make a move over a Porsche. But Luke Whitehead, as he clobbered the curb through the middle part of the corner there, Luke Whitehead is going to remain behind Correca's. Perhaps not. He's actually sending one to the outside, so maybe team orders no longer in play. And Luke Whitehead, will he go for the move? And he does go for the move indeed. As meanwhile, Iemolo versus Bischoff still scrapping between one another, and Iemolo holding on to that position. But those Veloce cars swap around again, and it might be a similar case with the McLaren versus Ferrari, as Steinbrenn's got a fantastic view of all of this, because the 296 and the McLaren scrapping ahead of him, drifting on the exits as they head down the hill in the first time of this lap. Of Valentine in the Ferrari managed to get the move done, and Steinbrenner trying to maintain traction in the rear tyres of this McLaren. Doesn't have quite the level of stability as some of the other cars. The Aston Martin, the BMWs tend to be pretty good under power. McLaren, a little bit aggressive on the torque curve in the ECU map, so it can be a bit of a tricky one to wield around, as Bischoff sends one around the outside of Iemolo. Mighty move from the 2-time Pro Series champion, and I think that'll be one that we need to try to catch, because how did he go about setting this one up? It's been a long time coming for a man that has won so many races. He's the number 1 man on the LFM platform and in the server. And let's see, is there a mistake from Iemolo? Not particularly, just not the best of exits. How does Marco Bischoff pull off this move? Oh dear. Well, that's certainly one way to do it, as Iemolo then teleports it away, kind of slapped it away back onto the circuit. And Marco Bischoff says, thank you very much, not quite sure how I ended up here, but ends up in P9, although he's under pressure immediately from the Italian driver, who's not too happy about network getting in the way of his position, and is immediately trying to put the fellow Lamborghini under attack. Narks has been able to close up on the Veloce cars up ahead, and Marco Jonkers in the BMW, his teammate just lurking a little bit further behind in the purple M4. But Bischoff could have his hands full in just a moment. Santama versus Norita, so the Sprout cars involved in a lot of fights at the moment. We'll try to see if we can capture all of the scraps as they take place one by one. Niox versus Correca's will be the first one, I think, though the Aston Martin is too far away. Bischoff versus Iemolo. Looks like Bischoff has gone for a little bit of a lower downforce setup and is able to protect that position, but here comes the cornering capability of Iemolo's car. Around the outside he's sent, and is going to be on the outside again. Can Bischoff keep that Lamborghini in that P9 seat? He's got the BMW. Marco Jonkers trying to split the pair of them up as they head down the hill, and there's still side-by-side action door to door, as now Iemolo on the power may be able to get ahead of the BMW just about, And I tell you what, Gert Fischer, he'll be hoping there's more of these scraps to go, a bit wide for some of those cars on the exit that corner. Meanwhile, Steinbrenner, Santama, Noah Reader all scrapping away. Santama, a little bit of contact with Noah Reader, and Steinbrenner may take the pair of them on the exit. Aggressive defense from Santama, and now Steinbrenner completely boxed in by Noah Reader for a moment. He's gone all the way around the outside of the pole, and a big contact on the entry there. We'll try and get another perspective on all of that in just a minute, and there's even more contacts. Carter slaps it away in towards the side. Jardier now sent towards the outside. He's all kicking off. Carpenter's trying to go around the outside. Somebody, that's Walsingham, he's scrapping away with Jardier, unable to make his way through, and they all just suddenly, out of nowhere, cars left, right and centre, finding their way into one another. And we'll try to see how did all of that kick off to start with, because my goodness, big things happening in this battle further down the order. So let's try to catch up with Santama then, who really was at the heart of everything that was going on. So here's Noah Reader trying to fight his way back. Walsingham and Steinbrenner going side by side just behind. There's a little bit of tree action in the way, but the Noah Reader sends one out the inside. Now Steinbrenner gets his way through past Walsingham. Santama's going to go a little bit deep here, nudges the Lamborghini off the circuit. Steinbrenner senses an opportunity, goes to the inside. No Reader says, I don't think so. Slaps his way towards that inside line. Very aggressive. Under brakes there. Steinbrenner, I'm not sure if there's a little bit of contact from Steinbrenner where that also kicked on. Now here comes a Bosch into the side of the McLaren, who's going from bad to worse and all of that. And then it was still kicking off further down the order as well. I even think this battle is still going on now. My goodness. Spa, just like that, plays out in just the weirdest of ways, where all of a sudden just everything starts to go wrong all at once. Luke Whitehead holding his position ahead of Karekas and Nils Narks now, so once after maybe saving a little bit of tyres, has got himself into that P6 spot and isn't showing any sign of losing any time soon. Pit window has now opened, so mandatory pit stop able to potentially start to influence the way this race plays out. Undercuts and overcut strategies at play. Michael Frey unable to make a move. What about Innestroza? Contact with Makovsky heading in towards Lake On. And Innestroza going to be sent over the grass. Oh, that's awkward. And he's got Steinbrenner on his case now as well, who's trying to find his way through. And I think these two have actually found themselves a bit of a familiar position before, because when Innestroza had that earlier contact. As also do want to check in on this man. He's had a bit of a sad day so far, but good news if you're an ITB Racing fan. Jacob Osterman pushing on, still lapping very quickly, now just 6 seconds behind the rest of the grid, and we are less than halfway through this race, so definitely opportunity for him to make his way back through the field. And yes, the Porker is not looking particularly very handy at the moment. I think all forms of nimbleness have been removed from that car's arsenal with the damage that Innestroza has on board. We'll see him be one of the earliest to pit as Luke Whitehead continues to come under pressure from his teammate. Will his teammate go for a move? And the bus stop chicane, the answer is no, but Nils Knox, I don't imagine, will be quite so friendly and respectful. And what about Iemelo sitting on the inside of Marco Bischoff? He tried the outside last time round, a bit of contact between the pair of them. Hope neither of them wanted to go into the pits, because that ain't going to happen now, as heading towards the start-finish line, as we've got Bischoff, Iemelo, Yonkers, and Gert Fischer now. Lamborghini, BMW, all in a big scrap, as Karppinen goes for the undercut strategy and looks to see if he can get himself out of all of that scrapping and dial in some clean laps to move his way up the order. And yeah, it does feel a little bit kind of short course style racing, doesn't it? Just laying everything on the line at every given moment. We'll go on board the front splitter for a moment of this Aston Martin. Fantastic noises from this twin turbocharged V8. But at the end of the straight, between the slipstream and everything else at hand, unable to do anything. What about Iemelo this time alongside Marco Bischoff? Contact again! These two cannot stay out of each other's doors, and the two BMWs are fighting now amongst themselves. It's the two teammates behind of Fischer and Yonkers, the two Lamborghinis who have slapped each other, I think, more times than I can count over the course of the last few laps, and we'll see what the stewards have to say about that. We'll try to catch up a little bit with what took place up and down the rest of the field, because the stewards have definitely been busy. Unfortunately, it's been pretty busy in the comms box so far, as well as Makoski, Addison, Holm and Veetstalker all join Timu in the pits and start trying to get those pit stops done and out the way as early as they can. That's fantastic scrap also for 23rd, excuse me, with Michael Frey. Soltov, Polikov, and Lobmeyer all in hot pursuit there. So, making our way through Stewart's inquiries, number 5 car was given a warning for a avoidable contact, and that belongs to Tinko van der Velde, so reigning champion get a little bit lucky there. Number 36 car gets a drive-through penalty for causing a collision on the second lap, and that belonged to someone I don't think is in the server anymore, so unfortunate stuff from them. Meanwhile, Kareka's still hustling around the back of Luke Whitehead's Porsche. Does he send one up the inside? No, but he's got to be mindful that Aston Martin just feels like it's lurking that bit closer, but none of them deciding to go into the pits on this occasion. IMLO doesn't get alongside Marco Bischoff. Marco Bischoff says, I think I'll just take the opportunity to go in the pits now. He's got a bit of damage on his car. Maybe we'll get that repaired. I don't imagine he will. A lot of door-to-door contact probably isn't affecting the performance too much overall, but certainly get himself out of this fight and try to see if he can unleash some pace in clean air. Neil's actually looking in a pretty handy spot now to maybe make a move on Grant Karekas. We'll see what he's able to do on the next charge up towards Lecombe. 10-second time penalty for the number 27 car, and that belongs to Jan Drexler further down the order. Number 12 has a 5-second penalty as Niles sends one towards the inside. Defensive move for the first time for Karekas. Niels, how brave is he under brakes? Yaston's good under brakes, and so Niels does a little bit of contact. It turns into further contact mid-corner, and the BS Plus competition car and the Veloce and McLaren get a bit glued together through there, and that the Aston Martin will take the position, much like Jardier versus Natter. Jardier finally getting the move done. The speed advantage of the McLaren able to see his way through, and it got pretty messy there between Niox and Karekas, and allowed Luke Whitehead to get quite an impactful gap between them, because of course that means that slipstream won't be quite as powerful as it has been on previous laps, and maybe the Porsche with its slightly saved tyres, better cornering performance, can start to eke away. 5-second time penalty for the number 12 car, and that belongs to Teemu Karppinen, unfortunately for causing collision on lap 3, so I imagine there'll be some disappointment there in the chat. Number 26 has had a 5-second time penalty as well, and that as a white flag out for Amelo, but I can't see anything too awful dramatic of him going on. Number 26 car, I think, also could be... that is Polikov in 23rd place who has that penalty. 5 seconds for the number 5 for forcing a car off track on lap 4. That tells you how far into this race we've actually managed to make it. Marco Bischoff just coming out of the pits. And who is the number 5 car in the server? That is Tinko van der Velde. So Tinko van der Velde has a 5-second time penalty, which he will end up serving in the pits. And Michi Tauscher, who is just lurking slightly behind, as the pair of them have really latched on to George Boothby over the course of this second phase of the opening stint. That will allow Michi Tauscher to move his way up into P3. In actual fact, Castorino will be very nip and tuck with Tinko's position after he served that penalty. So not what he would have wanted for the reigning champion. Number 22 car gets a 5-second time penalty for forcing a car off the track, and that belongs to... If I can try to track him down, that's Sean Tempest, currently down in P19. So we check in on Soldatov. Currently closest fight on circuit between himself and Michael Frey. Number 26 again getting another 5-second time penalty. So that, unfortunately, I've already forgotten who that was. That was Polikos, and that is 10-second time penalty for him. A 15-second time penalty for number 40 for causing a collision. That is going to be Michael Frey. As then after that, there's a lot of no further action. So a lot of chaos in the opening series of laps, and penalties dished out amongst the grid at the moment. But that's the way that things have played out for now. And potentially, I do agree, in terms of Luke Whitehead, the potential for him to lose positions further on in this race could end up seeing him drop down the order if he doesn't have too much to fight with in that Porsche, because he needs lap time. He needs a means of defense against those that we're looking to try to move up some spots. As a key penalties, Kylo, 5-second time penalty to be served in the pits for Tinko van der Velde. As I try to make my way through, see if I can remember. Sean Tempest has a penalty as well. Michael Frey has a 15-second time penalty for him. I think Sean Tempest has a 5-second, Polikov on a 10-second time penalty. And I do believe that other than that and a 5-second time penalty for Karppinen, that is the entire field in terms of their penalty situation. As Tinko van der Velde was gaining very quickly on George Boothby, and he has decided it is now time to bail on into the pits, get a fresh set of boots on his car, and so is Michi Tauscher in that Lamborghini. But of course, when they come out of the pits, unless Michi has a bit of a mare in terms of getting his car stopped in his box, it can happen. He has been known to have some unfortunate moments in sim racing. We won't bring it up again. I think I've said it on enough occasions for Tauscher. But yes, anything can happen, and the pit stops can suddenly go wrong. And Teemu's day goes from bad to worse. The 5-second time penalty may not have been too catastrophic, but the drive-through penalty certainly is, and that is going to really heavily affect his race going forward, and really sees him removed out of contention for much in the way of points and position. So disaster for one of the fan favourites in the chat for this evening. And also I want to quickly say big thank you to all of those that have followed the stream over the course of the first half of this race. If you are liking the action that you are seeing here at Spa Franchorchamps, then do consider following the channel. It's wonderful to have you joining on this wonderful journey and ever-growing community. And trust me when I say that we have incredible action like this every single time we go racing in the Case King Pro Series. So it is definitely a good place to be. And you can even find out a little bit more about how you can get involved in some of this action-packed goodness as well. Three-way fight between Lobmeyer, Brenham, and Makowski in all of that. The 296 currently sandwiched between the Porsche and the BMW, trying to see if he can make his way through the field, as getting a bit of a move on now. Tinko van der Velde still in the pits, wheels down though for Michi Tauscher, and you'll see there he goes on by past Tinko van der Velde, and he will have some nice clean track ahead of him as he looks to make his way forward in this grid. Lewis Rotors, George Boothby, Castorino, Whitehead, Iamolo all staying out for the time being. Meanwhile, it was all getting very close with Makowski and Lobmeyer. Karppinen now comes into the pits to serve his his drive-through. And unfortunately, of course, paying the price for just taking a few too many liberties with the track limits overall. Pretty close as well, actually, on pit exit between Bischoff and Marco Jonkers, but Bischoff in the end coming out on top of all of that. And Grant Karekas and Niels Knox not too far away in amongst all of those battles. Michael Frey coming into the pits now as well, has quite a chunky penalty to be serving in his stop. And now Makowski presented potentially with another opportunity. How good is this 296 in a straight line? It looks pretty handy, but I just don't think it's enough to contend with making a move over the Porsche, and especially when you've got the slipstream of Sean Tempest just up ahead. So Tempest, Lobmeyer, Makowski, Brenham now making it a four-way scrap. Meanwhile, your race leader has come into the pits. So has George Boothby, so has Castorino, who will be looking to try and see if he can get himself pretty cozy with the gap to Tinko van der Velde after that 5-second time penalty, and a lot more of your lead runs coming into the pits. Bit more of a straightforward strategy, it seems, for Spa, not wanting to go too early on the undercuts and not really wanting to leave yourself in overcut position either. And it's not entirely surprising overall when you consider it's a longer lap. So the effect of an undercut, the effect of fresh tyres, typically speaking, the longer the lap, the more an advantage in terms of overall track time that you can gain that you may end up getting. So when those undercuts start to happen, you're going to want to react pretty quickly, otherwise they could find themselves very far away from you, and that could be that position over and done with. But equally, this track is very demanding on the tyres. That's why we haven't seen too much in the way of a really aggressive undercut like we have at certain other races that we have been to so far this season, or in the Pro Series in general, because it just doesn't quite tend to work along those sorts of means. As Tempest, Lobmeyer, Makowski, Brenham very much nip and tuck heading towards the bus stop chicane. Makowski, can he send? We sent one up the inside of Lobmeyer. They're very ambitious under brakes. I think Tempest got so confused and scared by the whole thing. He's got wide out of that. Lobmeyer's around and contact with Makowski on the exit. The BMW Voice-Time Brenham takes a pair of them, but very quickly things going wrong and sent into disarray once more at the bus stop chicane. It all started with Makowski as he heads towards bus stop chicane. You're going to see we're gaining in the slipstream And it's going to be a big swing towards that inside line. Manages initially to get the car stopped, but then it all kind of goes wrong because of the McLaren just up ahead. Lobmeyer then ends up going around, collected by McCoskey. He doesn't really actually have too much in the way to go. And also Brenham goes around the outside and then tries to pick up the pieces and collect those positions afterwards. As more battles starting to kick off once more. Lewis Roters maintaining his comfortable lead advantage over George Boothby by 5.5 seconds. Mitchy Tauscher just 1.5 seconds behind Boothby, losing out a little bit with that strategy that he's had so far. Needs to just gain a bit more time and he'll start to get that slipstream effect in a bit more of a strong way. Marco Bischoff applying the pressure to Grantas Correcas. Car on the turn, glued to the gearbox of Jardier. That was very similar to how these two were finding themselves in the scrap earlier on in this race. Of course, tyre advantage side of things now reset as we enter the final 40 minutes of this race. We've just about made our way beyond the halfway point, but that does not mean that the action is going to quiet down any time soon, as this will be continuing to rage on all the way to the end. Donington Park, say, was a perfect example of that. A couple more drivers doing their pit stops. Santama, I do believe, the last car to come in, have a bit of a tail-happy moment on the exit of No Name with Walsingham, Steinbrenner and Noah Reeder all come in to serve their mandatory pit stops, and Lewis Roters will start to nearly resume his race lead in that number 21 car. And he has so far remained composed, collected, of course, rather helped out by Osterman's drive-through penalty at the start of this race, but pole position for the German driver, put himself in a perfect position as Aiemelo may be about to have another opportunity at Marco Bischoff. These two, that's some pretty intense fights so far, and Aiemelo, I don't think, is planning on particularly making any calmer anytime soon. Sent towards the outside line for the Lamborghini driver. Cameron taking a little bit of time to catch up, and the two V10 screaming their way down to Lake On. Brave under brakes. We've seen it go wrong here before. It's a bit cleaner this time around. Nope, spoke too soon. Contact on the middle of the corner. Marco Bischoff holding on just about over and under potentially for Aiemelo as they head down the hill. Harsh defence, slamming the door shut from Marco Bischoff and won't allow an opportunity for Aiemelo. Has he kept it tight to the apex? He has, and it's brought Marco Jonkers into this fight as well. And whilst I don't think coming into this there was particularly a strong rivalry between Bischoff and Aiemelo, maybe by the time they finish up here today, there could be something. And as I was saying, that penalty of Tinko van der Velde, Castorino was able to capitalise on it and finds himself just ahead of the reigning champion. Santama, the last driver to come into the pits, does make his pit stop. And Lewis Roters will take over the lead of the race once more in just a moment. White flag out briefly for Aiemelo. Maybe a bit of a slow moment through Pit Path as a yellow flag for Sean Tempest. Something kicking off further down the order. You can see there's also some of the shenanigans going on with the cars that are making their way by the McLaren driver. We'll try to keep an eye on all the fights that we can. See BMW behind, trying to work out who might have been involved in that. I think that was Oystein Brenham, who I think has conceded some position afterward. Big drift from Sean Tempest, already just about to go to wall. That's where it all kicked off. Oh, that's incredibly unfortunate, and I'm sure the steward will have something to say about that. My goodness, we joined that about 3 frames too late in terms of when we saw it all kicking off, as had the big oversteer moment through No Name, and then it all went down here from there. Luke Addison now in the Ferrari, not a car particularly able to make up too many positions, but I think on this occasion with the damage that Sean Tempest has, he's going to allow the 296 to make his way through. Angel and Stroza battling away with Steinbrenner, trying to see if he can use the Porsche and its advantages in the corners to gain some position, but we know this car's running a little bit on the wounded side at the moment. Meanwhile, Tinko van der Velde unable to make his way past Castorino on this occasion, and he may very much come to rue that penalty because he was looking like he could compete for a podium and nick some places off the likes of George Boothby. But right now, losing time behind the Italian driver, who again is looking to put in another consistent performance as Santama just making his way out of the pit lane. Stroza will briefly go on board with him for a moment. Can he find an opportunity down the inside? He's barely gaining anything in the slipstream. Can he do under braking? Steinbrenner just about leaving enough room for the very tip of the Porsche, but in the end is not able to make his way through, and will have to find another opportunity elsewhere, as Amadeo Castorino continuing to withstand the pressure from Tinko van der Velde as the dentist drill of the flat six. It's one of those things. I generally tend to love the sound of a flat six. It's a pretty good sound. But yes, I must admit that when you're in top gear down the Kemmel Straight for quite a while, and you're up at the top of the rev range, it does start to get a little bit potentially on the irritating side. We'll agree with you there. Meanwhile, speaking of irritating, unfortunately, Castorino is exactly that to Tinko van der Velde, who is still unable to find an opportunity through. This Aston Martin, it just looks like it's a pretty handy car to have right now in a straight line. Nils didn't quite seem to have the same level of straight line speed opportunities as this Aston that we're on board with at the moment, but with the slipstream that he is getting, could find one as Marco Bischoff, something's kicked off there. I think Iemolo. What on earth has happened there between Iemolo and Marco Bischoff? I want to kind of see what's taking place. I think we might be able to squeeze it in just before the next drag race. So, Iemolo closing. These two have been having one of the busiest times in the grid. A lot of fighting. Is he just going to go sailing on past in the braking zone? And the answer is, here comes Iemolo. As we make our way towards the apex, there's the track. There's Marco Bischoff. And Marco Bischoff back into P9. And in actual fact, a little bit of a concern, because on the back of his car, he now has the company of Marco Jonkers, who I can tell you, as we make our way down the Kemmel Straight, is trying to size up an opportunity, heading towards Lake On now. Can he get down the inside? No, he decides to hold off for another occasion. He's got Gert Fischer that he is bringing along in tow as well. So we'll see how this scrap plays out. I can tell you also Michi Tauscher gaining a tenth or so over George Boothby. Pit window now closed, but no problem at all, because everyone has served their mandatory pit stop for the race. So Michi Tauscher trying to see, upon his return in towards the Pro Series, can he get that Lamborghini on to the second step of the podium, as Makowski and Leon Benedict. Makowski sending one up the inside as they get to the end of the Kemmel Straight. Does get the move done. I think there's some other scraps kicking off. Sean Tempest versus Sammy Foch. Tempest around the outside of the Bentley, trying to see what he can do, but he can't hold on to that position, and the McLaren will get the move done in the end. Tony Mahoney has sent into the wall through Eau Rouge and Radion. It's easy done. And I think to fully appreciate this, we'll have to go on board. You see, gets a bit of a wiggle when it just sets it in motion. Here, oh my goodness, that was Polyakov managing to get by head with. And by an absolute miracle, I do believe that Tony Mahoney managed to just about keep it out of the wall. Now comes the 17-point turn of doom as he tried to get himself going again. But my goodness, Polyakov, I'm sure that he took quite a deep breath and tried to make that Porsche as narrow as he could as he came flying through there. Good reactions from him. As I correct, it's a bit of a poor lap from him last time around, losing a bit of time to Nils Narks, who was giving Luke Whitehead all sorts of problems in P6 at the moment. And when we were talking earlier whether or not Luke Whitehead would come under threat later in this race, not having that slipstream buffer in the form of Grant Carecas, we are starting to likely see the answer to that question over the next few laps. And yes, Kylo, Luke is currently on a 2 back-to-back win streak and has 3 race wins to his name so far this season. Doesn't look like he'll be making it 3 on the bounce, but still he'll be closing out the first half of the season with a 50% win rate, which is very, very strong, it must be said. 6 wins across 12 races is the only... Sorry, it's the equal highest record of wins that we've had in a single season. And Carecas and Whitehead, and Tinko have come pretty close on a couple of occasions at getting it towards 7, but in the end, 6 only good enough. So Luke Whitehead, he's starting off on a pretty good opening to the first half of the season, and we'll be looking to see if he can improve upon that record and see what he can do. Yes, Michi Tauscher, very strong performance from him. as he is putting a lot of pressure onto George Boothby again, just taking a couple of tenths or so out of the McLaren driver on the last lap, and seeing if he can size up a move in the coming laps. And that Lamborghini, probably a car that can actually look to contend with the McLaren. It will start to really scream its way in towards the upper revs, as of course the V10 naturally revving pretty highly already. But you get that slipstream, you get a little bit more rotational speed in the drivetrain, in the tyres, and all of a sudden the thing starts to sound like it's ascending into another universe. As we'll check on in on Marco Yonkers, who may actually be in a position to make a move on Iamolo's. Fallen away from Marco Bischoff. Those two, of course, have been going toe-to-toe for a long, long time. Yonkers, though, does he think about dive towards the inside? The answer is no. Iamolo gets his braking sorted on this occasion, but it could be a different story by the time they get to the end of the Kemmel Straight. The BMW has tended to be pretty handy when it comes to straight line speed performance. Mitchy Tauscher still a bit too far away, again just chipping away at that gap between himself and George Boothby. Just a half a tenth improvement, but every bit that you can close in that slipstream, it gets more and more impactful the closer that you are. So half a tenth now will be worth less than if he can get himself within half a second, for example, where then he'll even reap a bit more benefit. Meanwhile, as Lobmar is watching with a great deal of interest the fight between Benedict and Anufriev, kicking off the Meat Snacks Aston Martin, diving down the inside at La Source, and it's going to be an overrun under potentially. We could have some side-by-side goodness or terrifyingness. That's not even a word, but I think it expresses the emotions correctly. Through Eau Rouge and Radion will go on board the front splitter of Lobmar, and there's almost contact on the entry. You don't want to be doing that, lads. And that's about Lobmar. Could take the pair of them. Oh, it's getting very tricky, and Lobmar comes flying on through, and I chose the right on board to go with, because for the first time the Porsche may actually outtrack the Aston Martin. The cameraman's looking entirely the wrong direction, but Lobmar's trying to take two for the price of one, but the Aston Martin still has enough legs in a straight line in the end to come on through. But Lobmar's not done with this one just yet. Over and under through Lecom, take a bow. Lobmar is a little bit forceful on the exit through the next corner. Leon Benedict makes his way up into 26th place. The stewards could have something to say on that scrap, but fantastic opportunistic driving from Lobmar there. Saw what was taking place ahead of him and capitalised at the very first instance that he could. Someone that will be trying to do the same will be this man, because the gap, I said a moment ago, it spread out a bit. Maybe the Iamolo Bischoff tension of fight, that was over and done with. No, we're back to it again. Half an hour on the clock and 30 minutes of possibilities for these two to swamp once more. Tico van der Velde, though, trying to put Castorino under pressure, but the Italian driver, he is a mature and patient man, and he is managing to keep him at bay for the time being. The door left open, potentially. It's not very open, but Bischoff just about manages to leave enough space to avoid contact, but it's a fantastic exit for Iamolo, and he's putting the pressure on now, heading in towards La Source. But the grunt that Bischoff has, in the end, looks like it could outweigh that number 19 car, and Yonkers all in the meantime trying to see if there's any opportunity. You can see Iamolo trying to get the exit out of turn one, but had to actually back off from the power midway through, and we're going to have a couple of drag races I think it'll be very interesting to watch. The first one, Tico van der Velde versus Castorino, the Aston Martin and the BMW pretty handy in a straight line. And it's going to go the way of the Aston Martin. Nils Knox too far away from Luke Whitehead, but here comes Iamolo trying to go around the outside, and I'll tell you what, Yonkers is coming into effect as well as Iamolo. What on earth is kicking off there? Some sort of form of technical fault maybe for Iamolo. It's going very slowly, but the scrap that's been kicking off time and time again, I don't think it's quite over and done with yet, but certainly swapping of positions, and we'll try to see what's happened there, but I think we might end up missing it, because in Stroza versus Sontov, they're going to have a battle all the way of their own, heading into the drive-through for track limits. Track limits there for Iamolo, maybe a bit too ambitious through Radion, and just cutting a little bit too much as he came over the crest. Of course, when you're battling another car, it is a little bit more blind, but it already is, and unfortunately just misjudging the placement, and unfortunately it's going to drop down the order, so just decided not to really involve himself too much in that fight anymore. The good news though, although not perhaps if you're Marco Bischoff, is that Yonkers and Gert Fischer have now joined the party, so the battle inside the top 10 is still not done. It's just different people that are involved this time around. Iamolo, you see, going pretty slowly. Hopefully he will charge on to the end but a pretty demoralising position, it must be said. Speaking of someone that's been charging on, fantastic as Jacob Osterman, number 7 car, the ITB Racing driver, who was giving his teammate a pretty hard time in the opening couple of laps. Unfortunately, a drive-through for being out of position at the beginning of the race saw him drop down the order, but he has gained a net 11 spots. Bear in mind, we started with 40 cars. He's now up to P29 and is lapping anywhere between 1.2 seconds to 3.4 seconds faster than those drivers that are ahead of him, and he still has 25 minutes of opportunities. And I said he could maybe work his way towards the top 20. It's a maybe top 20 is ambitious, but it certainly could be on the cards depending on how the scraps end up playing out ahead of him. Marco Jonkers now finds himself applying the pressure. Familiar territory, staring at the back of the Lamborghini for a while, but the colours have just slightly changed as now he looks at the Sprouts Esports car of Marco Bischoff. Gert Fischer a little bit further back, not quite able to contend in this mix just yet, but now let's see what's the pace of this BMW. Oh my goodness, it is very good in the opening phase. Well, the Lamborghini, by the time it gets halfway down the straight, maybe there was a little bit of network in there that just kind of offset how strong that speed was. It looked like initially out of Eau Rouge, the BMW was gaining a lot of time, but as the revs build up, that V10 really starts to pick up some pace and just make it tricky for the BMW to find an opportunity through. So no opportunity just yet. Meanwhile, in Astroza, on the case of Soldatov once more. They've got Santama that's joining the party. Could be a big double slipstream for that McLaren. It's going to be closing up rapidly as Inostroza sent towards the inside line. Does he send it down the inside line? He does not. The Porsche is already rather wounded, although we'll go on board as he tries. Once again, we've seen these Porsches go for these over and under style moves. It's a bit of a wiggle for Soldatov, and Inostroza, he's not messing around. He's trying to set one up the inside. There's a little bit of a middle of the road defense there from Soldatov, but he keeps the position for the time being, and Inostroza will have to wait for another opportunity. Also, I can tell you, Lobmeyer has lost a position to the McLaren of Leon Benedict. And as a quick reminder to those who could be new to the world of LFM, if this is your first time being a part of our streams, although just actually a fan, let's chime in on this scrap here whilst we're talking about all of this, because the man I was talking about making moves up through the grid, Osterman continuing charge on. Now he has 5 cars ahead of him, and that'll do. Luke Anderson, I think those two are pretty good friends, of course. I think because I do believe ITB Racing, a South African rather kind of orientated team, and Luke Anderson very much in that community, of course, as well, letting his fellow countrymen on by. And Osterman up into 27th place, and will set off in hot pursuit of a new Frev in just a moment. But if you're wondering what all of these number plates in the server actually mean, that they correspond to the driver's relative elo within this grid. As Santama's going to interrupt me because he's sitting well on the inside of Angel Astroza. There's a little bit of contact. Will there be contact of a second apex? It's going to be very tight between the pair of them. The torque of the Porsche is good enough on the exit to keep the McLaren at bay, but I think Astroza, especially with the damage that he has on board that car, is looking likely to be rather vulnerable by the time they get to the end of the Kemmel Straight on this next lap. But the world of LFM, we have a ranking system, skill-based matchmaking, of course, over on the full licensing that we have going on the platform, where you can compete in daily races and also championships like this and many, many others of wonderful, glorious things. All of those races end up contributing to your ELO and your skill rating, excuse me, your safety rating as well. Safety rating, obviously fairly obvious measure of how much of a clean driver you are, as Astroza goes very deep under brakes, and Santama, I think, might get the move done. He's been very fair and forgiving to the Chilean driver as he rejoins the circuit, scrapping it out, and somehow Astroza is actually going to hold on to that position for the time being, so we will keep an eye on that fight, much like Tauscher versus Boothby and Van der Velde versus Castorino. But these number plates in the server, these then correspond to the relative elo of each driver, effectively a measure of each of their skills and what they have developed in terms of their achievements on the LFM platform. A bit of a couple of anomalies. Like Michi Tauscher hasn't quite spent as much time with us, but he is, of course, a very, very talented driver in the cockpit of that Lamborghini. So the number 31, a little bit out of position for where we would typically anticipate him. But a lot of the time when you do see these high numbers in a position that is far lower than that number, that means that the driver is doing a very good job of really maximizing performance from a race, and that'll help them move their way up in the ranking system in the future. So great stuff from each of our drivers in the field, and continuing to do wonderful, wonderful things as flying up through Eau Rouge and Radion once more. 7.2 seconds is the gap between Lewis Roters and George Boothby, with just 20 minutes left on the clock. I think it would take possibly a drive-through penalty. Oh dear! Jacob Osterman, I think I've called something too soon. He was charging his way through the field, but something seems to have gone wrong there. We've got Santama versus Innes Stroesman as well. It's all kicking off. We'll try to go back. Nils Niles going down the inside of Luke Whitehead as well. Guys, give me a chance. And side by side between the pair of them, Niles trying to see if he can get it done into the next right-hander. I don't think Luke Whitehead has anything that he can do to fight with. Kicker oversteer on the exit. He loses momentum and he loses the position in the process. Let's see if we can try to check in on everything that took place further down the order. So here's Osterman on the back of Lobmaier. He'd already dispatched of Onufriev, by the looks of it, on the previous lap. And let's see what happens to Jacob Osterman there. Is there going to be contact? Because it's McLaren. It's going to be gaining thick and fast on the run up the hill and goes towards the inside line. Oh dear, I don't like where this is heading. A big contact, there we go. A bit of a touch on the rear of the Porsche, and somehow Lobmaier keeps it pointing in vaguely the right direction and manages to keep on going. And then it was all kicking off with the likes of Niles and Luke Whitehead. We won't even see the rest of that play out on the replay, unfortunately, but we do know, of course, he did get the position. But Jacob Osterman, just a little bit of contact with the Porsche in front. They had a wiggle. Lobmaier trying to regain control of the car. Of course, the Porsche renowned to be a car that is difficult to really kind of reclaim control over. It will keep on fighting you, and you just have to keep your foot pinned and hope that that pendulum swing effect gives up eventually as Tinko van der Velde sends one up the inside. A little bit door-to-door action in the entry to the bus stop at Castorino. He holds on to that position once more, but 20 minutes. You'd have to wonder if he's going to be able to keep the BMW at bay for that long. Same can be said for Marco Bischoff versus Marco Jonkers, the two of them scrapping away. Gert Fischer, a great view of these two going side by side in towards turn one. But yeah, just to recap on that instant with Osterman. And oh my goodness, Gert Fischer very ambitious on the brakes there. Almost goes into the back of his teammate. And I'll tell you what, his teammate is being rather ambitious himself, trying to see if he can make it side by side through Eau Rouge and Radion. We know the BMW has pretty good grunts. Is he going to slot behind? He does. Marco Bischoff then makes it all back into single file. Marco Jonkers, a pretty good run, but it's not as good of a run as Gert Fischer, his teammate. And how's he going to play it? He says, there you go, mate. Have a little bit of shove towards Marco Bischoff and see, are we going to see that Lamborghini pull out in second? There we go. Defensive from Marco Bischoff, aggressive from Jonkers. Gert Fischer trying to see if he can find anything between them. He's trying to help his teammate and also help himself. But in the end, Marco Bischoff, I think, just about does enough, almost squeezing the BMW off the circuit entirely. But he does, in the end, maintain that position. And the two West Competition racing cars will have to try to regroup, recuperate. And in actual fact, they've got to be mindful of this man. Valentin Barron, that 296, has just slowly been making his way up the order and now finds himself potentially very much amongst this fight. And could be putting some pressure on these two. And this has gone very wrong. Oh my goodness, Tinko van der Velde almost going around entirely through pit pad then. Is there going to be a swapping of positions? Is anything going to be conceded? Game back? It doesn't look like it. And so it may end up just simply going to the steward's room. We'll try to get our best view of what took place there. So Tinko van der Velde through for a much better exit than the Aston Martin. That Aston Martin starting to struggle a little bit for the front tyres. And Tinko sends one down the inside from downtown. And you have to wonder if really that move was quite on. That came from a long, long way back. And Castorino, I'm not sure he really had too much of a choice there in terms of the line. We'll have to see what happens in the steward's room about that. Of course, Tinko did get a 5-second penalty previously as what lost in the position to the Italian driver for forcing a car off the circuit. Meanwhile, Gert Fischer on his teammate still trying to apply the pressure, so is Valentin Barrier in this four-way scrap for P9. And with 17.5 minutes left on the clock, whilst the likes of Lewis Roters having a pretty easy time. George Boothby, Mitchy Tauscher still keeping things alive in the fight for those remaining podium spots. Tinko van der Velde scrapping away at Castorino. Whitehead versus Niox, not done and dusted just yet. And now this fight as well. Carniter applying the pressure to Jardier in towards turn 1. And the other Sprout Esport Lamborghini of Noah Reader going for a little bit of an odd line on the exit there. But he will, of course, gain it all back on the slipstream. And will chime back in on the next batch of drag races. Aston Martin versus BMW. And it goes in favour of the German outfit. And it's not quite the case on the next because Narks holds onto position over Luke Whitehead. What about Kurt Fischer with his teammate? Still the bump drafting continues, trying to help Yonkers stick with Bischoff then, but Valentin Barrier looking very quick at this stage of the race and is maintaining good pressure. McLaren and the two Lamborghinis of Jardier, Nater and Ida scrapping away into that same sequence, but they all maintain position for the time being. As somebody's been doing a wonderful amount of digging at the grand statistics of race winners. And then you see George Boothby, like I say, he hasn't had a race victory in just a little bit. Of course, took some last season as Lobmar and Onufriev scrapping away. And it does look like the Aston Martin on this occasion is going to come out on top. But George Boothby, our winningest driver of all time so far in the Case King Pro Series. Bischoff very close behind on 9 victories, with Karekas and Tinko both on 6, Whitehead on 5, Jardier on 4, Smollier on 3, and Massier on 3 as well. And of course, yes, Mr. Carpet with his elusive 11 victories. They fly under the radar sometimes. They're just that good. And but unfortunately, of course, team not having the best of days, getting that drive-through penalty as well. Lobmeyer trying to use all of the characteristics that he can from that Porsche to gain on the Aston Martin head, but he just can't get close enough. In actual fact, now he has Luke Anderson applying the pressure behind, seeing if he can open up an opportunity in a moment. We'll try to check in on the stewards as well. We haven't looked at them for a while. So we have a 15-second time penalty for the number 9 car, and that, who does that belong to? That belongs to Nils Steinbrenner. So Steinbrenner, 50-second time penalty for causing a collision. 10-second time penalty for number 37 for an unsafe rejoin. Meanwhile, Lobmeyer might be able to lose a position to Anderson in the 296. Not the fastest car in a straight line, but Lobmeyer's car has been a little bit in the wars. I think Anderson trying to send one out the inside. Lobmeyer's late on the brakes, though, but he's a little bit too late. Will be defensive. It's bringing Osterman back into all of this. He, of course, is trying to recover from what has been a very, very difficult day for him so far. A man that is still waiting for his first race win. You'd have to think it would come at some point in this season because he has been very, very quick. He gets the move done on Addison, and potentially with a straight line speed advantage over the Porsche, he could be looking to get the move done on the Porsche of Lobmeyer in a moment as well. Number 37 car, though, with that 10-second time penalty, that is Santimer for that unsafe rejoin. I do believe, so that would have been the incident down at Pouon. A 5-second time penalty for the number 8 car. That belongs to Niels Niox. So Niox has a penalty, and that's for causing a collision as well. Here comes Osterman trying to make his way up into 26th position. I think he's going to do that one fairly easily in the end. So he is still fighting on, trying to see if he can extract any more points out of this race. But Luke Whitehead, maybe that's why he's not pushing too hard to get past Niels, because Niels is carrying a penalty in all of that. A warning for number 19 for multiple avoidable contact. That belongs to... Who is that in the field? That is someone that I can no longer see in the server, so I'm assuming maybe something happened there, and the avoidable contact became less and less avoidable as time went on. The number 22 car has a drive-through penalty for an unsafe rejoin. That was Sean Tempest. So a disaster for the McLaren driver. A warning for the number 40. That was Michael Frey for multiple avoidable contacts. Warning for the number 35 for an avoidable contact as well. A 5-second time penalty for the number 14 car. That belongs to Paul Lobmeyer. So I'll see him drop down the order a little bit as well. And I think just about we're more or less up to date on that front, but we'll see how everything moves along over the coming laps. Mitchy Tauscher hasn't quite been able to sustain the pressure in the way that he once was. And number 19 was I Am Low. Thank you, Roberto, for the kind reminder on that front. As George Boothby managed to escape out of the clutches of the Lamborghini and hasn't really looked back since. And I'm not sure Mitchy Tauscher, with his pace at the moment, is going to be able to move his way any closer to a potential P2 spot, as again the two Beamers closing in on the Lamborghini of Marco Bischoff, but unable to make a move as they scrap away for P9 as Ida versus Natur now. Lamborghini versus Lamborghini. The Sprout Esport car trying to go around the outside. Has he got too deep on the brakes? No, he's absolutely timed it to perfection. Sweeps around, leaves enough space at the entry to the corner, and he's able to then maintain a very nice series of momentum there as Walsingham carrying great speed through the next sequence. Natur vulnerable through the right hand, now trying to see the course. The camber falls away from you mid-corner there, and Walsingham can't quite stick it around the outside in the end. And oh my goodness, Kylo's been extremely busy doing wonderful things, searching around for information on the podium front as well. Marco Bischoff, 27 podiums to his name. Maybe not the winningest driver, but definitely one of the most successful. And Kylo's got work cut out. He's getting requests in there as well. I shall leave that one to you. But incredible stuff there to find out. So Bischoff, Boothby and Karekas, your top three drivers who have featured on the podium the most out of anyone. After me just saying that Tauscher was falling away a little bit, he's decided to ramp up the pace and close that gap down by just a few tenths of a second towards George Boothby, and is seeing what he can do if he can close in towards at P2 position. A little bit deep into La Source though, and that's going to compromise his exit greatly as Yonkers now send one up the inside. Just about space given by Marco Bischoff. Again, he's not fighting for a podium today, but he's fighting like his life depends on it. One of the veterans of the Case King Pro Series, the only man to have 2 titles to his name. Yonkers has a single pole position. He's still waiting for a race victory and has made a relatively recent return to the series. He's not going for race-winning glory today, but he is applying a lot of pressure to this Lamborghini at the moment. He's had his teammate being quite kind to him, allowing him to take his time and try to find opportunity, and that opportunity may be about to come in a moment. Support for our Estonian driver in the field, Renault Koets, and do give a cheer to all of these drivers. They are facing 90 minutes around one of the most demanding circuits. Valentin Barrish trying to go around the outside of Gert Fischer as well. Marco Bischoff defending from Yonkers, who's just about keeping his nose in there. Valentin Barrish can't make it work, but what about Yonkers? He's still side by side with the Lamborghini. We've seen him be a bit squeezed off before. He's being shown the same treatment again. Gert Fischer still remaining behind the pair of them, being very kind. Bischoff holding the inside line. BMW sent towards the outside, trying to see if he can get the run on the exit into No Name. He can't, so he will have to stay single file once more and wait for an opportunity to come his way in the future. Stewards, I'm sure, still very busy, but no further action taken on any more incidents for the time being. Meanwhile, Mitchy Tauscher getting a wiggle on, maybe cooling the tyres to some extent, or just kind of recuperating. Something, sometimes when you've got the time to do that, it's good to just take a step back, allow the guy in front to get a little bit away, and just kind of re-evaluate how you're driving. Flashing of the lights there. Don't think there's been anything too suspect going on between them. Mitchy Tauscher just letting George Boothby know that he is there, and he is there to fight and try to nab that P2 in the closing stages. And apparently, I'm not surprised, Bischoff, who of course has had a lot of scraps. He was fighting IMLO for a very long time and now has a lot of work being put onto him from the 2 BMWs behind, trying to see if he can keep them at bay. But the closing stages of this race is getting very, very busy. And if you are enjoying this action that we've got all the way going to the end, like I say, if you are new to the channel and the world of LFM, big warm welcome to you and thank you for being here. And do consider following the channel, because I can guarantee you the goodness that the Case King Pro Series delivers like this is exactly what we have every single time that we go racing in this championship. George Boothby, again, that McLaren straight line speed, enough to keep the Lamborghini driver at bay. What about Niels Knox versus Luke Whitehead? Of course, there is that 5-second time penalty at play, so this really is for pride more than anything. As Luke Whitehead sent towards the outside line, trying to see, can he get a move done? on to the Aston Martin, but the Aston Martin straight line speed is simply too strong. Now we cut back towards the scraps further down the order. I think Jonker's too far away on this occasion. Someone that could be in with a chance. So Van Barrier, the 296 charging his way along, and Gert Fischer, he's been patient, trying to not push his teammate too hard, but now he's being compromised because the Ferrari is here to play, keeping its tyres a little bit more alive, I think, at this stage of the race. Walsingham versus Netter as well. The two Lamborghinis having a bit of a busy time for the battle of P16, and Carl Netter comes out on top in that one. We'll try to check in on Sammy Foch versus Michael Frey as well. I think they're having quite the scrap of their own further down the order. Let's see. So just a bit of an awkward run actually for Netter through that sequence, and now the Veloce Lamborghini starts to claw away at the gap, using the slipstream to his advantage, sends one up the inside, and goes very on by. So, unfortunately, not the most calculated of overtakes there, but was applying a great deal of pressure. That's what was going on between Samir and Michael Frey. We'll tune back in and see how they are faring now, and it's still the order that we left that fight in just a moment ago, as Mitchy Tauscher sent one from downtown on George Boothby, but he sent it a little bit too hard, and George Boothby is going to hold on to that position, and Michael Tauscher will have to wait for another opportunity, as we will have a look at that. How did that look from the onboard of the Lamborghini driver? And also, of course, bearing in mind, if he's got the pace, he can prime his attacks over the moment and just sort of see how ambitious can he really be. Answer on this occasion, not that much, as down towards the inside, sends it down the inside. You saw the back end actually even get a little bit unstable. George Boothby heads up driving from the winningest driver, as confirmed by Kylo within the world of LFM. With 10 victories to his name, and reads it to perfection and takes back that position. Mitch Tauscher has just about 3 laps left to go to try to make a move, as Gert Fischer has a lot of concern right now because that Ferrari, look at the gap, it's grown massively. These two must have scrapped away. Yes, 218s for the pair of them last time around, and Van Barrier, not the best run for him through a Rouge and Radion. In actual fact, I wonder if he backed off. It did look maybe a bit of a cut over the crest there, and trying to avoid getting a drive-through penalty, especially with such a few laps left to go in this race, as the BMW holds on to P11. Jonker's still unable to get past Bischoff, who, as we've had confirmed, is certainly feeling the pressure from all of the fights behind. He's managed to fend off, I think, arguably 3 cars at this point. He's fended off Imolo, Gert Fischer and Van Barrier. Now he's just got Marco Jonkers that's still applying the pressure, but a lot of hard work going into the Lamborghini at the moment. And the same can be said for this man, Mitchy Tauscher, who again, we're hunting for an opportunity. And it's going to be pretty tight towards the line, actually. So Lewis Roters, who's had a phenomenal drive so far today, number 21 car, he is going to start what will be the penultimate lap, because that clock has just tipped under what it would need to be to get a third one in. So 2 laps left to go in this race, and it's a long lap around here. 4 minutes to drive. It might seem like a long time with plenty of opportunities, but they will disappear thick and fast. And Mitchy Tauscher, he knows that, but he is just within a few tenths, and he has closed that gap to a point where maybe, even if it comes down to the last lap of this race, that he can go for a move maybe even sooner, because George Boothby does seem to be struggling just a little bit at this stage. Meanwhile, Netter versus Noah Reader, we could see a swap of positions in towards the bus stop, almost being pushed along by the other Lamborghini. Walsingham watching in the distance. Netter sent flying around the outside. Does he get it stopped this time? He does. Now, how do they fare in the second apex? It's going to be pretty tight between them. Noah Reader, good momentum on the exit, and it's a good exit as well from Aidan Walsingham as he gets the power to the floor, and it looks towards the outside line. No, towards the inside line. Tries to sell the dummy, but the space is not there. Fantastic racing between them. And Noah Reader, he's hoping this will compromise these two cars' exits and allows him to run away a little bit into the distance. Meanwhile, Samir Foss side by side through Blanchemont. That's brave with Polyakov. Fantastic racing between these two. Their drivers, they always do this. They have some sense of calm, and 3 minutes to the end, everything goes completely into nonsensical battling as Polikov does hold on to that position. Walsingham now versus Neter, heading towards the Kemmel Straight. The slipstream being provided by Noah Reeder, and it might be enough to see the Veloce car make the move around the outside late on the brakes. So Neter's all caught up over the curb. He couldn't stay tight to that curb, I don't think, if he tried, but a little bit of contact, but they make it through. They're just about bouncing around on the curbs in towards the next series of corners, but they do all just about survive, and Walsingham gets himself up into P16. Tauscher, half a second adrift from George Boothby. Maybe a little bit too far away to make a move. Also, I tell you what, Nils Narks, the scrapping he's done with Luke Whitehead, it might be fun on track, but Grant Skorekas has got himself within a margin to get the position over Nils once that 5-second time penalty is added at the end of the race. So he'll be looking to drop 2 positions to 2 of the Veloce cars in this race. Lewis Roters starting his final lap for what has been probably the most peaceful drive from anyone's perspective that we've had so far this season, but a fantastic job nonetheless, and just has to keep it clean for one more lap. We'll point the camera away from him because I don't want to commentate to curse it too early, as Mitchie Tauscher, just 2 fundamental opportunities left in this Lamborghini to try to make a move. I've also seen another sneaky name pop in, the follow from a one Tobias Pfeffer, and we've seen a few more of the guys from the top level of esports chiming in the Pro Series. It would be fantastic to have you in the Championship as well. Of course, one of the fastest drivers on ACC without a shadow of a doubt, and this is what all of the fantastic action kicking off each week looks like. So have a think about getting involved. It'd be good to have you in this one. Mitchie Tauscher, though, unable to make his way past George Boothby. And Boothby holds onto the position, so it will all come down to the drag race shortly towards the bus stop. Van Barrier has not been able to make his way past Gert Fischer, and Jonkers has dropped away from Bischoff. Bischoff may have just about done enough to hold on to that spot in the closing stages of this race, so we're keeping our Lewis Roters halfway through the lap at the moment. Van Barrier being sent towards the outside line, 296, surprisingly quick in a straight line, trying to see can he use this cornering potential to make his way past. He can't get alongside enough, so maybe he'll have to send one up the inside in the middle sector. That's an opportunistic move, trying to carry the momentum mid-complex through Lake Om, couldn't get the job done there, and Gert Fischer heads up driving from him to not shut the door too early. Meanwhile, Tauscher and Boothby now making their way through pit path, and Tauscher is very close to the rear diffuser of the McLaren, and if he gets a good run through this next couple of right-handers, the overtake could certainly be on. And it's going to be on for a few of these guys on this closing lap of the race. It's been fantastic action from start to finish, and we'll see how each of them fare. But Lewis Roters, he may not have been on camera very often, but the ITB racing driver, he took pole position in commanding style. He fended off his teammate Osterman in the early stages. He showed that he was here to fight for the championship, and he has beaten his teammate to getting that first victory for ITB Racing. Lewis Roters wins the Spa Franchorchamps, but George Boothby for P2. The scrap goes all the way to the end. Tauscher cannot find a way through, and George Boothby does hold on to another podium. Tauscher takes 3rd place on his return to the series, and the celebrations in the chat from the rest of the ITV Racing supporters. A well-deserved commanding drive from Roters. Osterman will be, of course, very, very forlorn, I imagine, after today, but his time will come. He has demonstrated time and time again that he has a tremendous amount of pace, and will be looking, I'm sure, to bounce back in the second half of the season as he continues his championship charge. Santimer, a man that has had a pretty busy day. Bischoff did hold on to that P9 spot, as did Fischer hold on to P11. In the end, Santimer trying to make a move over Soltov in towards the bus stop chicane. He can't make that one stick. What about Osterman? On to Leon Benedict, trying to see can he recover one more position in the dire moments. He's going to send it around the outside. Benedict late on the brakes, matching Osterman. He's going to be sent in towards the tightest portion of the apex. Barely anything given. Fantastic defense from Leon Benedict on one of the fastest drivers in the grid without a doubt. Osterman recovers to 25th place. Lots of courageous driving from him. The 2 Porsches side by side on the exit. Michael Frey fending off Polikov. Sammy Foss watching the pair of them, but he can't make his way through, and they will take 28th and 9th respectively. And I think, as some sideways action amongst all that, as other cars make their way towards the end of the race, that will be everything that Spa Franchorchamps has to offer. As I think just a couple more cars left out on track. I think GB Holm might be the last one to cross the line in 34th position. But incredible stuff from the entire grid this evening. And another brilliant race which we have been treated to. But Lewis Roters, like I say, he may not have had the busiest of drives, but he earned his piece in those 90 minutes. He put a fantastic lap together in qualifying to take that pole position ahead of an extremely competitive grid. And then, of course, just managed to drive off into the sunset. He had to stay consistent. He had to stay clean all the way to the end. And he gets his first victory in the Pro Series. And I think the first victory as well for ITB Racing. With any luck, we'd have him in for an interview. Lovely stuff. So we will look to talk to our race winner from today in just a moment. But fantastic stuff from the grid and the podium. All of those positions very well deserved and earned. Of course, Roters commanding from start to finish, never looks back. George Boothby, valiant defence on multiple occasions to Mitchie Tauscher and Tinko van der Velde as well. And Mitchie putting a lot of pressure onto the winningest driver, as confirmed now from George Boothby, but unable to take P2 in the end. But glory goes to this man today, disappearing off into the distance and enjoying a very peaceful time in the hillside of Spa Franchorchamps. Lewis Roters, big congratulations to you on your first victory, and I think ITB's Racing's first victory in the Case King Pro Series. How are you feeling after that one?
Yeah, thank you. Also, congratulations to the podium. Yeah, feeling really great. Did a really good race without any errors, or just outbrake myself sometimes, but yeah, feeling really great. Was a good race from myself. A bit unfortunate for Jakob with DDT at the start. I need to look at it, but yeah, from my point of view, it was the best opportunity and the best chance to win the race.
Absolutely, and it was the kind of what you've put together on your side between qualifying and the race. It was commanding from start to finish, and I want to take a little bit of a look back at that qualifying lap. How good did that feel when you hooked it up around it? Because Spa, it's a tricky one to put together. There's so many corners. It's a long lap. And it's so easy to get a corner cut in various different parts of the circuit. So when you get that car dialed in and you extract that time, how satisfying is that inside the cockpit of the GT3 car?
Yeah, it was a really great lap. The track conditions were a bit slower than the track where I practiced. And my heartbeat just ran over 180, I think. And then, I thought I outbraked myself for the last chicane, but it was perfect. Perfect acceleration, and did a better lap time than I expected.
Yeah, fantastic. It's always a pleasant surprise, isn't it, when it comes together like that, where you think you've overcooked it, but with pure talent, that you get it tucked into the apex in the end, and it all comes together. Yeah, it was a fantastic qualifying lap from you, and you really kind of put your marker in qualifying to show that you were very much gunning for your first race victory early on, and it was a statement to the rest of the field. And it puts you in pretty good stead in the championship as well, because you're only a handful of points behind your teammate of Osterman. And Luke Whitehead didn't have the greatest days. He didn't have too bad a day, but not the greatest of days for the championship leader. And you'll just be nipping away up the order, I think, a little bit. I think that'll put you P2 in the standings. Of course, at the halfway point of the season, plenty of races left to go, and there'll be the drop scores to factor into all that as well. It feels like, from an outside point of view, that race to race, you just seem to have got stronger and stronger in terms of how you've dialed in performance with the car. Is that how it's feeling from your point of view, and does it give you good confidence heading into the second half of the season?
Yeah, I really have good confidence, especially for this race. I really had the most confidential feeling for a race. And I think it was a good return after I got spun in the last corner last week, and I think I did the best job I could do today.
I think it's definitely fair to say that you extended a gap that is not too often seen in the Case King Pro Series. Obviously, we've seen in both qualifying and the race that the smallest of margins are being the deciding factors at times. So yeah, to cross the line with a 9+ second advantage, I think it's fair to say you did a pretty tidy job with that one. So yeah, an incredible performance from you. And going forward into what we have next, we'll be heading to the Nürburgring for next week's race. And how are you feeling for that one, and the way that the McLaren, of course, a little bit tricky to judge sometimes with the custom bop and everything, and how it might fare from car to car. But what's the general feeling of going into that one?
Yeah. I mean, with a race in my pocket, a race win in my pocket, I'm really confident to do a good result next round. But Nürburgring isn't my best track, and yeah, just need to figure out how the McLaren feels on this track. And yeah, if Jakob and myself could do such a good setup like on this time, and yeah, hope for the best for the next race, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. You've definitely shown, based on the performance that you put together today, that you quite clearly got all the qualities and pieces to get another victory to your tally, and I'm sure it will be a tally that continues to increase as time goes on. So a lot to look forward to there at the next round. So a big congratulations to you once again, Lewis, and for getting your first victory in the Pro Series and putting together such a commanding drive. I apologise you didn't have too much time on camera. As you might imagine, there was quite a lot of chaos happening elsewhere in the field, but it doesn't mean to say that you don't deserve all of the appreciation that the chat has shown you as well for your commanding victory today. So a big congratulations to you, and thank you for popping in for an interview as well.
Yeah, thank you too.
Thanks a lot, Lewis. We'll see you next week.
See ya.
Great there to speak to our race winner from today, and a man that is very much contending towards the pointy end of the championship. Like I say, Luke Whitehead, I do believe, will still have maintained that championship lead, but Lewis Roters continuing to nip at the heels of the Veloce esports driver and show that perhaps, despite Osterman having generally looked to be the stronger of that pairing, and it did look like at times today, pace-wise in the early phase of the race, that Osterman did look to be very, very quick indeed, that Lewis Roters is here to fight, and he wants a piece of the pie, and certainly trying to get the largest slice of it indeed at the end of this championship. We'll take a look through the results in just a second, as I do believe those are ready to go. And we'll see how that has all played out, because Spa, once again, putting on a fantastic show for us and giving us action all the way until the end. I've poked a button incorrectly, so there'll be a small delay on the results. There we go. And we can have a look at all of those. So Lewis Roters taking victory then here at Spa, ahead of George Boothby, Tauscher, Castorino, another consistent result for him, P4 with Whitehead, Karekas, Narks, Van der Velde, Bischoff, and Yonkers with Fischer, Barrett, Coots, Jalier, and Ida rounding out your top 15, as Bischoff taking a deep breath, I imagine, at the end of that race, much like myself, to recuperate from that one. Walsingham, De Campo, Steinbrenner, Solstar, Santimer, Innestroza, McCoskey, Benedict, Osterman, Anufrier, Frey, Polikov, Foch, and Addison see your way to the end of the top 30. And then as we get in towards these last few positions, we had a full packed house grid for tonight with Longmire, Drexler, Vietschalker, Jimmy Holm, and then Brenham, Iamalo, Tempest, Mahoney, Carpenen, and Lawrence falling beyond a lap behind the rest of the grid in that one. Of course, a long race, a difficult race for some, and certainly one that was gave a lot of trials and tribulations to drivers. Also, a big warm welcome to those who have just joined over from Boris's stream, of course. A man that we have so much to owe to in the world of LFM, and all the goodness in the Case King Pro Series that we get to experience. So a warm welcome to all of you, and of course to all of you that have joined for the first time here in the LFM Twitch channel, and for us here in the Pro Series. And we have gained another a lovely amount of you during the course of this stream, and it would be lovely if you have enjoyed all of the action from tonight, if you would consider giving the channel a bit of a follow as we continue to creep our way towards 1,000 followers, as we might just manage to tip our way over that milestone by the end of the year. It'd be fantastic if we could. It's been such a journey over these last few weeks, and you guys have been amazing, and it's been wonderful to have you a part of this journey and this ever-growing community. And speaking of that ever-growing community, if you have enjoyed all of the wonderful goodness that Spa has had to offer, and you fancy getting involved in a little bit of the action yourself, then you can head over to the lowfuelmotorsport.com website, and you can get yourself signed up, get yourself a license. You can work your way through the ranks and compete over in the daily racing that LFM has to offer, as well as, of course, as all the championships like the Case King Pro Series, the Endurance Series, and all other goodness that you can get involved with. Some handy-dandy prizes that you can get your hands on as well. And if maybe the world of ACC isn't quite something for you, it's pretty great, but I can understand that it may not always be everyone's cup of tea. The R Factor 2, of course, is also available on the platform as well, with a whole plethora of other championship series, cars and tracks to get involved in, notably the Nordschleife, which we do have coming to the world of ACC, but sadly not until next year. So if you need your Nordschleife fix in the meantime, the R Factor 2 on the LFM site is the way to go about it. And you can take on one of the trickiest challenges, I think, amongst Spa and Bathurst. I think it's fair to say that then the Nordschleife is kind of that holy trinity of GT racing, of maybe with the exception of Le Mans as well, of the most difficult tracks that these drivers in the real world, and some of us when we have access to these glorious opportunities as well in the sim racing ones, can take on. So definitely look to get involved in all of that. And if you just want to be a part of this ever-growing community and share all good things motorsport and sim racing, and just join a rather friendly bunch of people, really, you can also head over to our Discord server as well. It'll be wonderful to have you in there as well. And if, you know, maybe cars even aren't your thing, yeah, share a picture of your dog. Everyone loves dogs. 98% of the time people love dogs, so just be a part of that. We're a nice bunch. It'd be lovely to have you in there and show you our world as we continue to embark on this adventure together. So thank you everybody so much once again for joining me for another evening of action at Spa Franchorchamps. I do have a small amount of disappointing news, I'm afraid, that next week there won't be a stream from me as we head over to the Nürburgring. I'm afraid that I will be away from the microphone, heading into some endeavours for work, but the week after we will be back and the Pro Series will be as unfortunately, I can see that the news has gone down very well. It's very sweet of you in a way, and I'm sorry to bring you disappointment in that regard. But the pizza's gone down. I'm a terrible person. I am sorry, everybody. On the one hand, it is lovely to know that the Pro Series and the world of LFM has such a positive impact. Such a positive impact on your weeks. It's always something that I very much look forward to and look forward to sharing with you, but I'm afraid that unfortunately next week will be one of those few occasions where I won't be able to be there to present all of the action. We'll have a wonderful recap though, where we can see all of the goodness that's taken place in the at the Nürburgring round, and when we catch up again at week 8, where we will be heading to... where will be for round at number 8? We'll be at Catalonia. A circuit hasn't been on the calendar in a little bit of time, so that'll be an interesting one, see how we get on there and see how things are shaping up in the second half of the season of this incredible championship, as more and more racing, drama and action will continue to be throughout, I'm sure, to the very end, and it'd be lovely to have as many of you with me as possible as we head into those closing stages of the season to see who will be crowned champion of Season 12, who will be king of the custom bop that's coming for Season 12 of what, of course, has been a brilliant season that continues to have turns and twists all the way to the very end. So I look forward to seeing you all again in a couple of weeks' time, where we'll be back out here on the channel. But in the meantime, catch up with all the other streams and goodness that the rest of the LFM team will be putting together and have to offer to keep up with all of your LFM fixes. So I'll see you all in a couple of weeks then, everybody. Thank you again for joining me this evening, and I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. But for tonight then, it's goodbye.